Chapter 795. He's coming! He's coming! The enemy cried out. Gu Fei looked carefully. These people weren't masked, nor did they have any guild emblems. He didn't recognize any of them. What was even more amazing was that Gu Fei was facing a group of mages and archers. The enemy was using ranged classes to bully the immobilized Gu Fei and the others. There were no melee classes protecting them. They didn't expect Gu Fei to be able to move so quickly in this situation. These two classes had been bullied by Gu Fei countless times, so it was a walk in the park. When his sword slashed down, their faces were filled with fear. The mountain road was crowded. Although there were melee classes in the enemy's formation, they couldn't squeeze through. Gu Fei slashed left and right. In order to avoid Gu Fei's attacks, the players ran as far away as they could. As a result, the players on Gu Fei's left side were all pushed against the mountain wall. The players on the right side would be knocked down the mountain if they weren't careful. After killing a few people, the enemy seemed to have been inspired. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Push towards him! Push him down!" A group of people fearlessly rushed towards Gu Fei. Gu Fei used dual flame flash, leaving an empty space in front of him. The people behind him continued to push. Gu Fei used electric wall, and a group of people were pressed against it, trembling. Push him against the wall. Someone had a strange idea. They surrounded a group of people from the other side, wanting to push Gu Fei against the electric wall. However, dual flame flash's cooldown wasn't very long. After a few rounds, they had long since woken up. Gu Fei turned around and slashed again. A group of people were gone. Gu Fei's PK value continued to rise. He took a look at it. It was already at 56. Gu Fei hadn't washed the PK value he had gained from attacking the archer shooting range. He followed the others outside to level up. Right now, his foundation was solid, so it was easy for him to rise. Fortunately, this place was still some distance away from Moonlit Night City. It wasn't the outskirts of the city, so the city guards wouldn't come to the wilderness to chase after him. However, looking at the crowd piled up on the mountain road in front of him and the guys still running in his direction in the distance, Gu Fei estimated that if this continued, there would be over 100 PKs. It was impossible for his PK points in the hundreds to disappear naturally in this lawless wilderness. However, if he wanted to wash them away, he would have to endure the pursuit of the guards. Gu Fei had experienced this once, and it was quite difficult. This time, Gu Fei only felt that his shoulders were heavy. How long would he have to wash them all? As he thought about these future matters, Gu Fei didn't show any mercy. He killed as many as they came. He also carefully calculated the effects of mana loop to ensure that he wouldn't run out of mana. On this mountain road, there were only a dozen or so people standing in a row. The other side had an advantage in numbers, but they couldn't make use of it. Gu Fei was basically killing them row by row. The players wanted to cry but had no tears. If they wanted to run, they were paid to do this. If they died, they would still receive compensation, but if they ran, their bonuses would be deducted. They could only grit their teeth and come forward to feed their swords to Gu Fei. Damn you! Black Dragon Mountain Range. Where is Black Dragon Mountain Range? Have you never been to Cloud City before? Cloud Twilight was currently shouting for his subordinates to come to his rescue. Right now, there was an interception in front of them and a pursuer behind them. Moreover, this was his territory. If he didn't call for reinforcements, he would lose face. Damn, you really haven't been there? Go to hell, find someone else to talk to you. Where were the people? Where did they all go? Not a single one of them knows the way? Cloud Twilight was extremely anxious. Normally, he would get annoyed by the chatterboxes in the guild. At this crucial moment, he only felt that there were too few people in the guild. Cloud Twilight brought some people to Cloud City to help Qianli in battle. Some of the players in the 10 Meetings Alliance knew about this. Since their guild leader didn't say anything, they were happy to stay at home and do their own things. However, now that their guild leader had shouted, they had to listen to his orders. As such, they hurriedly went to gather the troops. At this time, Gu Fei's charge was already effective. The other side was in a mess and couldn't even take care of themselves. How could they have the time to deal with the players who were hiding from the falling rocks? Moreover, The ranged classes at the front had already been wiped out by Gu Fei. Go, stick to the wall and walk. The Han clan's young master gave the instructions, and those who were still alive stuck close to the mountain walls, forming a long line as they moved forward. Seeing that the players at the front had already left the range of the falling rocks and were about to jump out to fight, they were stopped by Han family young master. Don't go out, just keep walking like this. Even if you fight, stick to the wall. The players at the front were startled. They hurriedly retreated and continued to stick to the wall. You're worried that they'll destroy us along with their own people? Lua wasn't far from Han family young master and asked. We have to be on guard against this possibility. Han family young master nodded and sent a message to Gu Fei. Provide support. Gu Fei was in a killing frenzy. When he looked back, he saw that the team had stuck to the wall. However, sticking to the wall was like walking on a single plank bridge. It was too easy for the enemy to stop them. Gu Fei didn't say anything else as he began to slaughter his way towards the wall. He was truly invincible. The players who were stuck to the wall were either killed or ran away. Cloud and the Twilight's group, who were walking at the very front, smoothly arrived at Gu Fei's side. They immediately felt as if they had successfully logged in, and they let out a long sigh of relief. Hurry up! Clear the mountain path before that team arrives. Han family young master ordered. At the same time, he looked down on these idiots who were blocking the way. They were actually fighting to the death on the mountain path even though they were already in front of them. They were truly foolish. It wasn't like they didn't have an escape route. They could retreat down the mountain path a few meters behind them and stand at the entrance of the mountain path to form a pocket formation. How could they be so powerless now? These people's ability to adapt was too weak. Of course, Han family young master wouldn't warn his opponents. He only looked down on them in his heart. Although the other side's reactions were slow, when they saw their opponents continuously sticking to the wall, they finally came back to their senses. They called out to the others, and the team hurriedly retreated. Han family young master estimated the number of people on the other side. There weren't too many of them. There were only around 300 people, which was the same as his side. However, in terms of quality, there was a huge difference. After being slaughtered by Gu Fei for a while, the long-ranged players had suffered heavy casualties. The other side's tactics were very targeted. It was obvious that the long-ranged players were the main force. With the long-ranged players dead, the team seemed even weaker. Do we still need to stick to the wall? Let's charge? Yun Zhongmu's group couldn't hold back anymore. Seeing Gu Fei slaughtering so valiantly, their hands were itching. Han family young master looked up at the sky and said casually, if you want to charge, then charge. Your level is your own. As a result, everyone looked up with him. They were very hesitant. Motherfucker, what's there to be afraid of? Charge with me. Yun Zhongmu roared. He was the first to jump out and rush to Gu Fei's side to help him. When the others saw this, their blood started to boil. They cursed and rushed out. One Gu Fei opponent already couldn't hold on, let alone this group of tigers and wolves. In an instant, the other side fell. Someone in the team shouted, retreat, retreat. Chase, hurry and chase. Yun Zhongmu had killed 2 people, so he was also excited. When he heard someone shout to retreat, he provoked and chased after them. Originally, they were a bit afraid that the other side would throw rocks and logs at them. However, there didn't seem to be any signs of such a thing, so their morale naturally rose. The men in the flower bush also jumped out and shot randomly. Let's charge out in one go. Yun Zhongmu roared. Action was faster than words. Gu Fei had already used teleportation and directly flashed into the group of people running away. White light flashed, and Yun Zhongmu attacked from behind. How is this still a PK? It was practically a slaughterhouse. The other side ran down the mountain in a daze. However, with Gu Fei's movement speed, how many people could outrun him? At this moment, he still didn't let go. Moreover, the other side didn't fight back. This allowed Gu Fei to recover his mana. At this moment, he was preparing to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. Suddenly, he felt something strange to his side. He turned his head to look and saw that there was already a group of people waiting on the slope. The other side wasn't as stupid as Han family young master thought. They had more than 300 people, but because they knew that fighting on the mountain road wouldn't be of much use, only a portion of them went up. The others waited at the entrance of the mountain road in case of an emergency. Originally, they thought that this emergency wouldn't be needed. Who would have thought that Qianli, that abnormal drunkard, would be able to leisurely stroll over in this kind of environment to kill his way over? This group of people could really endure it. They waited on the slope without moving until Gu Fei finally killed his way out of the mountain road. Then, they suddenly appeared and gave Gu Fei a pleasant surprise. At this moment, the battle on the mountain road couldn't be compared to the one on the mountain road. Once the mountain road appeared, it immediately became wide and flat. Hundreds of people were able to get into formation and fight together. On the contrary, it was Gu Fei and the others who were suppressed on the mountain road. The space was narrow, and it became a situation where they were outnumbered. Gu Fei wasn't unfamiliar with this scene. Back when he followed the Reigning the Four Seas quest, the great thief Suo Tu, who walked in this position, had also led the mountain bandits in a similar situation. However, this time, the ones doing this were humans. They were more flexible than NPCs. It was also more difficult to deal with them. At this moment, the enemy players who were running away also turned around and attacked together. The melee players went up to fight with Gu Fei, while the ranged players focused their attacks on Cloud Twilight and the others behind Gu Fei. Spells and arrows flew down together. Cloud Twilight and the others wanted to fight back, but they couldn't spread out their formation. The difference in firepower was obvious, so they could only helplessly retreat. The team was thus cut off. Gu Fei went down the mountain road alone, but he was surrounded. Cloud Twilight and the others wanted to follow, but they were forced back to the mountain road. If you can't kill your way out, then come back. Han family young master hurriedly sent a message to Gu Fei. To be honest, even the sword demon and the others, who were familiar with Gu Fei, didn't know how strong he was. As such, Han family young master didn't know whether Gu Fei could deal with this situation. If he could, then he would break up the enemy's formation by himself. If he couldn't, then he could only retreat to the mountain road and lure the enemy back up to fight. Retreat to the mountain road. When he thought of this, Han family young master was shocked and hurriedly waved his hand, "Pay attention and dodge." Just as he finished speaking, the boulders and logs from the top of the mountain came crashing down again. Although the young master of the Han clan had warned them in advance, at this time, all the people had piled up, and it was impossible for them to stick to the wall so quickly. Instantly, dozens of people were crushed to death. Damn, you copied my tactics? I'm starting to panic. At this moment, Han family young master didn't forget to look down on his opponents and praise himself. Chapter 796. His opponent was obviously not as idiotic as the young master of the Han family thought. Even though he was suspected of plagiarizing his plan, considering the geographical conditions and the personnel of both sides, the other party did not just copy his plan to death. Han family young master's giant boulders and rolling logs were the main method of killing the opponent. However, the opponent's giant boulders and rolling logs were a method of control, preventing them from spreading out on the mountain path. They could only watch as Qianli drunk went deeper alone. Han family young master suddenly realized that if the opponent could successfully kill Qianli drunk here, it would be fine if they all died or escaped. In fact, the opponent did not care. Once Qianli drunk, the opponent's main target was only Qianli drunk. If the others came up to serve as a foil, they would only be buried together with him. If they knew what was good for them and left early, then no one would waste their energy on them. If that was the case, did they have some special methods to surround Qianli? Han family young master's heart sank. He knew very well that Gu Fei's current position was very important. His existence, even if he did not attack, was a kind of restraint and deterrence to the opponent. If he died here, a large number of levels would be lost, and this powerful bargaining chip would no longer exist. Gu Fei did not think too much. He turned around and saw that the others had all been blocked back to the mountain path. Moreover, the attack from the mountain peak had made them unable to move. His only hope was to kill these people and lead them down the mountain path. This shouldn't be difficult, right? Gu Fei thought. The opponent's strength was not strong. Some of the warriors were even killed by Gu Fei's dual flame flash. It could be seen that their levels and equipment were relatively low. Although there were many of them, they were not a threat. Gu Fei checked his mana. It was circulating well. He also glanced at his PK value. 128 points. He was quite speechless. The guards shouldn't be coming here, right? Gu Fei jumped up worriedly and looked into the distance. He didn't see any sign of the guards, but the group of people who had been marching here since early in the morning was getting closer and closer. If this group of people really killed their way to the front, it would really be a little troublesome. Gu Fei sped up and continued to chop people. Just as he was about to cast a twin flame flash, he suddenly saw something flash in front of him. Then, a black light appeared under his feet, forming a hexagram pattern. By the time Gu Fei realized that the pattern had already been formed, he did not know what spell this was. He hurriedly tried to jump out of the formation, but he did not encounter any obstruction. However, his sharp senses had already noticed one thing. When the hexagram pattern appeared, the twin flame flash that had just appeared on his Night Streamer sword had been extinguished in an instant. Is this a fire extinguisher? As Gu Fei was muttering to himself, the enemies pounced on him like a tide. Dual flame flash's cooldown was still a bit short. Gu Fei waved his hand and shouted for wall of electricity. However, there was nothing. Spell can't be used? Gu Fei's reaction was not slow. He had enough magic power and there was no mistake in his chanting. However, no spell was cast. Combined with the fact that the twin flame flash's flames had been extinguished, he quickly deduced this conclusion. At this moment, there was no time to think too much. The enemies were already in front of him, and it was obvious that they knew Gu Fei's current situation, so they appeared to be very fearless. Gu Fei knew that a feint wouldn't scare them. These people would probably rush up and throw him down the mountain. Since that was the case, he could only give it his all. Gu Fei did not retreat, but instead advanced. He suddenly rushed forward and kicked at the incoming person. As expected, the incoming person did not dodge. He stuck out his chest and allowed Gu Fei to kick him. His arms were already stretched out, ready to hug Gu Fei's leg. Gu Fei had already expected him to do this. His flying kick suddenly rose high, going straight over his opponent's shoulder. His other leg kicked the ground and he leapt up, bending his leg over his shoulder and stepping on his opponent's shoulder. Borrowing this force, he leapt up. His opponent's hands hurriedly tried to grab him, but he only managed to grab air. Gu Fei's jump was also quite difficult. He didn't jump very high, but he quickly borrowed another person's head, stepped on it, and jumped again. The players knew that Gu Fei couldn't use spells at this time, so their fear disappeared. They thought to themselves, "Can you fly into the sky?" So they didn't panic and calmly waited for Gu Fei to land. In the end, someone panicked and shouted in the crowd, "Hurry up and do it. 5 seconds. Only 5 seconds." This person was also in a hurry and didn't have time to send a message. When these words were shouted, the players hurried, but Gu Fei also heard it. 5 seconds? What else could it be 5 seconds? Naturally, it was referring to the state where he couldn't use spells. It seemed that the strange black spell was a skill that prevented mages from using spells for 5 seconds. 5 seconds, so it was only 5 seconds? Gu Fei smiled. It seemed that the crisis wasn't as terrible as he thought. Didn't 5 seconds pass very quickly? Jumping in the air, Gu Fei wanted to act according to the original plan. He suddenly swung his hand, and the flying hook in his hand flew out, accurately catching a protruding rock on the mountain wall. The players were still waiting for Gu Fei to land, but he unexpectedly swung the rope and stepped on the stone wall, climbing up. "Attack! Attack!" Someone in the crowd kept shouting. Gu Fei deliberately stepped on the mountain wall, causing the rope to swing left and right, and then he actually began to climb up like a pendulum. The long-range attacking players looked at the pendulum Gu Fei, but they couldn't aim accurately. A few of the weak-willed players looked at the swaying and almost fell into a trance. Damn it, he doesn't fall even after swinging like this. Is there any justice in this world? Someone in the crowd shouted sorrowfully, but they could only watch as Gu Fei climbed higher and higher. Finally, he flipped over the protruding rock and couldn't be seen from below. Since they couldn't see him, they couldn't use direct attacks. As for the area of effect spells, the heavenly fire wheel wasn't unlimited. The rock that Gu Fei was squatting on was higher than the heavenly fire wheel, so he couldn't hit it. Smash him down for me. The players below had no other choice. They began to call for support from the sky, trying in vain to smash Gu Fei directly with the rock. The players on the high ground were also diligent. When they heard the call, they asked for the coordinates and immediately moved their weapons over. They looked down, but they couldn't find where to attack. Weren't the people below all on the same side? Halfway up the mountain, a protruding rock. Do you see it? Someone below said. I see the rock, but I don't see him. Where is he? You're asking me? Everyone had different opinions. Some people guessed that Gu Fei had used a teleportation scroll to leave the moment he got onto the rock. Smash the rock. In the end, they decided to try. Therefore, the players on the mountain didn't care anymore. They aimed at the rock and started smashing things. At this time, Gu Fei was still on the rock, but he was also tightly pressed against the mountain wall. The mountain wall could not be as smooth as a mirror, so with Gu Fei's shrinking, the mountain wall was bumpy and blocked the view of the people on the mountain, so they could not see anything. How are you guys? Gu Fei felt that he was quite safe, so he sent a message to the Han family young master and the others. We're trapped. Where did you go? The Han family young master and the others only saw Gu Fei jump up and fly, but he went to the back of the mountain. They didn't know what was going on here. I'm fine. You're fine, but we're going to be in trouble soon. The opponents couldn't do anything to Gu Fei, so they had no choice but to attack the Han family young master and the others. The Han family young master and the others were blocked in the middle of the mountain path. They were afraid of the rocks when they walked out, and afraid of being attacked when they walked forward. However, the opponents didn't need to surround Gu Fei, so they sent some people to attack them. They were all archers, standing in the distance, pulling their bows and shooting. They lined up in a row, but the Han family young master and the others stood in a vertical line. They couldn't fight at all, so they could only retreat while the opponents moved forward. Don't worry. Gu Fei replied and looked left and right. His gaze fell on a section of pine tree that was sticking out horizontally. He immediately took out a hook and swung it. This was much more stable than climbing up a rock. Taking a deep breath, Gu Fei pulled the rope and swung it. He's there. He's there. The players below cried out when they saw Gu Fei appear. In the end, they saw Gu Fei climbing the rope and running on the mountain wall. He looked like he was running. His movement was faster than a pendulum, and the players who wanted to aim at him were in vain again. What was even more bizarre was that halfway through running and swinging, Gu Fei suddenly disappeared in a flash. Teleportation. There were still some smart players. The 5 seconds had passed, so they could use their spells. Where did he go? Everyone widened their eyes and looked around. Since they couldn't see where he landed, it had to be a protruding spot like before. Immediately, the sounds of this, that, and that came one after another. Everyone was shouting for the protruding rock they had discovered. What answered them was a heavenly fire wheel. Gu Fei looked down from above, so he could hit them with the heavenly fire wheel. The spell suddenly flashed in the air and landed. The players didn't know where the chanter was, so they could only count all the suspected places and ask the guys on the mountain to take a look. It was inevitable that they would feel dizzy if they kept looking down. The players on the mountain couldn't take it anymore and tried to stop them. Previously, when they were ambushing, they could just push things down after asking for the coordinates. They didn't need to look like this, but now they kept looking down. Everyone felt dizzy, and some were even warned by the system that they weren't feeling well. I don't think we should care. It's only this row anyway. Why don't we push it down? Someone suggested. That's right. We can't see where he is anyway. He's stuck to the corner, so how can we see him? Let's push it. All right, push it. The leader finally gave the order, so the group of guys pushed all the things that had been piled up here down with great enthusiasm. With more things, the commotion became bigger. The mountain rumbled, and the Han family young master and the others were shocked. However, when they looked up, they didn't see anything being thrown down. At this moment, Gu Fei sent a message. All right, come out and kill him. What's wrong? Han family young master asked. Gu Fei didn't reply. Han family young master looked up at the top of the mountain. Did that guy use up all their materials? But how would he know if they used up all their materials? At the top of the mountain, Gu Fei was already happily standing on the edge of the cliff. He looked at the panicking people in front of him and pointed at one person, Guild Leader Ao Dan. So it's you. Ao Dan was a nickname that Yun Zhongmu and the others used. This person's real name was Ao Huang, the guild leader of Moonlit City's Ao Tian Guild. He was also the person in charge of the Moonlit City workshop. Ao Huang looked at Gu Fei and took a deep breath. You also have the skill for rock climbing. Chapter 797. Ao Huang looked calm on the surface, but in his heart, he was panicking. They were squatting on the mountain and doing things like pushing rocks and throwing logs. Apart from Ao Huang, they were all noobs. Ao Huang and his men were in charge of doing this. Originally, he was secretly delighted, thinking that this job was safe and risk-free. Who would have thought that Gu Fei would directly climb in front of him? This bunch of noobs with no fighting strength, facing the most valiant killer in the parallel world, Ao Huang felt that he should just jump down. While watching Gu Fei's actions, he frantically sent out messages for help. However, no matter how fast the people below were, they couldn't be faster than the few steps between him and Gu Fei. However, there was a brave noob who suddenly roared and pounced forward. He looked like he was prepared to hug Gu Fei and jump down the mountain to perish together. This kind of fearless spirit was quite admirable to Gu Fei, but this matter was of great importance, so Gu Fei could only fulfill half of his wish. He dodged to the side, hooked his leg, and waved his hand to hit the noob's back. That noob couldn't control his strength and ran down the mountain in a majestic manner. Screams could be heard from the bottom of the mountain until a heavy object landed on the ground with a hong sound. Everyone's heart palpitated when they heard this. Gu Fei looked at his PK points and felt gratified. Killing people like this didn't count as PK points. The young master of the Han family and the others on the mountain path suddenly understood what was going on when they heard the exclamation and the sound of landing. Gu Fei had actually attacked up the mountain. Although they didn't know how Gu Fei did it, but just like what Gu Fei said, they could spread out their formation and charge. They were trapped here, so Ying Qi's main force went to tangle with Gu Fei. That was their main target. They only left a few ranged players here to push forward bit by bit. At this time, both sides received the news at the same time, but how fast was Han family young master's brain working? He immediately thought that if he didn't take this opportunity to charge out, the other side would immediately block the way again. He waved his hand and shouted, "Charge!" Cloud Twilight and the others had been toyed with by the enemy's ranged classes. They had long since been suppressing their anger. With a roar, they charged forward. Ying Qi's ranged class defense was instantly torn apart. Cloud Twilight and the others wanted to kill them all, but the Han family young master shouted from behind, "Don't fight. Get down the mountain first." Everyone came to a realization when they heard this. If they continued to dawdle with these fellows, they would eventually be blocked by their opponents at the entrance of the mountain path. The situation would not change. "Charge with me!" Cloud Twilight shouted. He didn't care if the party was complete or not. He rushed out to kill the players with speed. It seemed like it was a close call. Sure enough, the opponent had also mobilized troops to block the mountain pass. However, Yun Zhongmu and the others had already jumped off the mountain path. Their confidence was greatly boosted, and they were determined to not retreat even if they had to die. If they lost this position again, no one knew if they would have another chance to snatch it back. The two sides clashed and fought. Yun Zhongmu and the others used all their strength to charge out, and the reinforcements continued to arrive. By the time the mountain pass was blocked, at least half of the players had already gone down the mountain path. They spread out into a formation and fought with the enemy. Their numbers were slightly inferior, but their quality was superior. The opponent didn't have all of their forces. They had sent a portion of their people to chase after Gu Fei. At this time, there were still cries of alarm coming from the mountain. Looking over, they could see players continuously falling down the mountain. When they hit the ground, they would turn into white light. It was quite a tragic sight. Everyone secretly thought that Gu Fei was really ruthless. However, Gu Fei didn't think so. It was just a game. Being hacked to death or falling to death, it was all the same. What was so tragic about it? Go down the mountain and PK without using up mana. Making such a mature choice, Gu Fei felt that he was becoming more and more of a professional gamer. What about Emperor? Emperor had already disappeared. He wanted to talk to Gu Fei and stall for time, but would Gu Fei be stupid enough to do such a thing? After knocking that rookie down the mountain, he immediately rushed towards the proud Emperor. Emperor was the leader of a guild and also an expert. Getting him down the mountain was still a bit difficult. Gu Fei could only endure the pain and add a bit more PK points to kill Emperor. The other noobs didn't give up and wanted to die together. Gu Fei gave them a chance and purposely stood at the side of the mountain. The noobs were brave. They lined up and wanted to push Gu Fei down. Just as they were about to collide, Gu Fei teleported behind them and unleashed a flurry of kicks, not missing a single one. This scene was even more tragic. The people at the foot of the mountain didn't even dare to open their eyes. The noobs on the mountain also knew that they couldn't deal with the opponent in front of them, even if they used brute force. They weren't afraid of sacrificing themselves, but there was no point in doing so. If they died, they would have to run back to the respawn point. There was no point in doing so, so they hid far away. Gu Fei wasn't in a hurry to chase after them. He walked to the other side of the mountain and looked down. He saw that Yun Zhongmu and the others had already rushed down the mountain. If the rocks fell from the mountain, they would be a bit of a threat. He thought that it would be better to defend for a bit, so he sent a message to the Han family young master, "Can you guys hold on? This part is fine, but there's another group coming over." Han family young master replied. Gu Fei stood high up and could see far. Moreover, he had already seen this group of people. At this moment, they were much closer. In the blink of an eye, they were right in front of him. Damn, where are they? Where are they? How come I haven't seen a single person for so long? Yun Zhongmu shouted in the guild channel. Boss, it takes time to gather people. This wasn't a lie. When players had nothing to do, they would do their own things. They would go to the leveling area, do quests, farm gold, train their life skills, pick up girls, drink. It was a mess. It was impossible for them all to stay in one place. If they wanted to gather people, it would take time. Damn, I didn't tell you to gather 4,000 people. If you can, hurry up and come. Yun Zhongmu was furious. They're coming, they're coming. Although they said they were coming, how could they make it in time? In the blink of an eye, the other side was already in front of them. They hadn't even reached the bottom of the mountain yet. They're here. Gu Fei, who was standing at the side of the mountain, suddenly heard the commotion behind him. He turned around and saw that the other side's reinforcements were coming up the mountain. When they saw Gu Fei standing at the corner of the mountain, they were overjoyed. They weren't noobs. They had many tricks up their sleeves. Gu Fei had placed himself in such a dangerous position. Wasn't he looking to die? Surround them. The leader of the group gave the order, and the players spread out. Gu Fei glanced at them. What are you doing? After saying this, he turned around and jumped down. Everyone was stunned. What was going on? He didn't even fight, and he was going to commit suicide? This wasn't Qianli's style at all. Is there a rope? Cut the rope. A player roared as he rushed forward. When he looked down, he saw that Gu Fei had already reached the bottom of the mountain and was slaughtering everyone in his way. As soon as this killer arrived, the position at the entrance of the mountain was immediately lost. The other side's troops instantly rushed down the mountain, and under Gu Fei's leadership, they were completely routed. The players at the top of the mountain sent a message asking about this. They were so angry that they threw down their weapons. Fuck, he teleported. The players at the bottom of the mountain clearly saw that Gu Fei had jumped down from the mountain. When he was about to hit the ground, he suddenly teleported. He relied on this system skill to easily survive. The other side couldn't even stop Yun Zhongmu's group, let alone Gu Fei. A group of people quickly broke out of the encirclement. They turned around and continued to fight fiercely as they counted their numbers. The casualties were quite heavy. Just the two boulders and logs alone had killed nearly 100 people. It was impossible that there weren't any casualties in the chaotic battle after that. Yun Zhongmu had brought out a total of 198 brothers, but more than half of them had died. Many of the flower boys had also died. According to the ratio, the reborn amethyst had the fewest casualties. Yun Zhongmu and his men were quite manly. They knew the girls' standards and took care of them. During the chaotic battle, they protected the reborn amethyst members behind them. The flower boys were even worse. When the boulders and logs came crashing down, some of them even pushed the girls to the side and sacrificed themselves. Of course, there was also one who made a mistake and pushed the girl under the boulder. After being condemned by everyone, he sacrificed himself in the chaotic battle. Hold on a little longer. Our people will be here soon. Yun Zhongmu cheered everyone on. However, he didn't expect them to be able to hold on. Their opponents, on the other hand, had retreated. They didn't want to continue fighting and turned around to retreat up the mountain. Huh! Everyone was surprised. Although it was obvious that Ying-Chi's people weren't a match for them, their reinforcements were nearby. The people on the mountain could also come down very quickly. If they fought to the death and waited for the reinforcements to arrive, that would be the best plan. Yet, they actually turned around and retreated. Weren't they just letting them go? Han family young master frowned and looked at the approaching group. Could it be that these people aren't their people? But they aren't our people either, Yun Zhongmu said. Passers-by. Everyone was dumbfounded. The group that had been making them nervous was just a group of passers-by? However, the direction they were heading was undoubtedly from Moonlit City to Cloud City. It was rare to see such a large group of people heading to another city. Everyone guessed that they were doing a guild quest or something. Looks like Ying-Chi's people also think that these people are our reinforcements. Han family young master said. Ying-Chi's people? Yun Zhongmu was startled. Yeah, the ones intercepting us are people from Ying-Chi's studio. Did you think that it was a guild from Cloud City that had already set up an ambush here? Han family young master said. It's Ying-Chi. I met Ao Huang on the mountain. Gu Fei said. Of course, they were familiar with this Yun Zhongmu. Currently, the person who was going against them the most in Moonlit City was Ao Huang. Ao Huang is also Ying-Chi's people? Yun Zhongmu didn't know about this. Yeah, and he's also the boss of your studio in Moonlit City. Look, this is his business card. Gu Fei had received Ao Huang's business card, which made Ao Huang's heart ache. At this moment, it was still in his pocket. So this bastard is from the studio. Yun Zhongmu nodded his head. Then the situation is clear. Come, spread the word, we're going to PK all of Ying-Chi's places. That's not good, right? One of Yun Zhongmu's brothers said, our 10 Guilds Alliance has quite a few people who work for Ying-Chi. Fuck, this isn't the only studio. If you want to work, then go contact others. If you want to stand on Ying-Chi's side, then scram. Yun Zhongmu was furious. Chapter 798. Yun Zhongmu's words caused quite a stir in the 10 Guilds Alliance. Just like what the brother had said, there were quite a few people in the 10 Guilds Alliance who were temporary workers. They weren't like professional players like South Sword, who wanted to earn money to support themselves. Most of the players in the game were doing this for the sake of managing the game. Now that the scale of the studio was growing, doing temporary work in the studio to earn some gold had become a common method of farming gold in-game. Many players would contact the studio as soon as they entered the game and become temporary workers. There was no lack of people like this in the 10 Guilds Alliance. Some of them had worked together for a long time and were friends with the studio. The guilds suddenly breaking off relations with Image's studio was like a bolt from the blue, causing many people to feel conflicted. When there were many conflicted people, there was a conflicted group. Everyone thought about it and felt that the guild was going a bit too far. They had never heard of any bad blood between the guild and the studio. Why did they suddenly have to break off relations? It was most likely because of the guild leader himself. However, everyone's source of income had been cut off. Everyone was unhappy, so they all started to protest. They wanted democracy and the studio. The only reply they got was a single sentence from Yun Zhongmu. If you don't like it, get lost. Countless players were stunned. Ever since many people had joined the guild, They had seen Yun Zhongmu diligently handling the guild's affairs, big and small. He always strived to make everyone satisfied. Although he often scolded others, it was a habit of his. In their hearts, words like grandpa and grandson weren't curses. They were very intimate terms of address or tone of voice. However, this time, Yun Zhongmu didn't give them any face at all. He coldly said, "Get lost," causing many people to be confused. Only the older members of the 10 societies knew that Yun Zhongmu had always been like this. However, as the 10 societies alliance grew larger and larger, the relationships between its members became more and more complicated. This fellow gradually became smoother and smoother when handling affairs. Today, he most likely suffered some kind of provocation, causing him to reveal his true colors. However, this kind of Yun Zhongmu made them feel closer to him. The slick Yun Zhongmu only made them feel more and more unfamiliar. The older members all congratulated Yun Zhongmu for returning to his true colors and started to cheer for him. "If you don't like it, get lost." Dang 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 dang. The system notifications kept on ringing. Before anyone could express their opinions, some of the disgruntled players were kicked out. Needless to say, there was a lot of fresh blood in the 10 Guilds Alliance. However, the guild leaders and core members of the 10 Guilds Alliance were definitely Yun Zhongmu's brothers. Yun Zhongmu's irascible attitude made him stand on Yun Zhongmu's side without hesitation. He didn't even give Yun Zhongmu a chance to explain himself. If they were kicked out of the guild, their guild would be reduced to nothingness. This was the same as breaking off their relationship with the studio and cutting off their source of income. Seeing that they couldn't have their cake and eat it too, the conflicted people could only continue to struggle. However, Yun Zhongmu's hardcore brothers were already preparing to smash Ying-Chi's face, so they had no choice but to make a choice. Some guilds with extremely high points had no choice but to fall out with the workshop. Many guilds with low points had chosen to leave quietly. However, there was no lack of those who really wanted to eat both fish and bear paws. Their methods were different. Some quietly followed the team, thinking that this was a competition between the two teams and had nothing to do with personal matters. The studios might not mind, as they did things quietly. In fact, both sides could ignore them. There were also those who waved the flag and cheered in the guild, while secretly sending messages to the studios. They hoped to please both sides and treat them as one of their own. The latter was obviously more influential. Ying-Chi quickly responded to the news they sent out. Wrestling with the 10 Meetings Alliance? They didn't have the strength to do so. The existence of the studio was for the sake of profit. They were more willing to provide players with things that normal players couldn't do, such as mass production of military uniforms for Deepwater's guild in Forest Shade City. Most of these things didn't require any combat power. Although they had many players who were working as registered employees, and there were many experts among them, these people were not official employees of their workshop. They would receive money once they did a job, and when they encountered difficult jobs that required them to put their lives on the line, they naturally had the right to refuse. For example, piking with the 10 Guild Alliance was the most difficult job in Moonlit Night City. Even players who had just been kicked out of their guild by the 10 Guild Alliance and were filled with hatred would not accept such a job that would only give them a free level. Ying-Chi didn't respond to the battle at all. They only quickly closed all of their shops after knowing that the 10 Meetings Alliance was coming to mess with them. The people from the 10 Meetings Alliance swept around aggressively and found that these shops that were usually open 24 hours were actually not open at this time. They immediately understood that there must be people from the studios in the guild who leaked the news. The people from the guild had no choice but to report the situation to Yun Zhongmu. They were immediately reprimanded by him. "Damn it, there are people from Ying-Chi. Even if you use your knees to think, you should know that. Who asked you to announce this to the entire guild from the beginning? Are you brainless? TSK, aren't you also speaking after the fact?" The person who spoke to Yun Zhongmu was an old brother, so he wasn't polite at all. If Yun Zhongmu had thought of this earlier, he would have definitely given instructions. As expected, Yun Zhongmu was right. He didn't have the face to say anything else and could only change the topic. "Go find that bastard Ao Dan. That brat is from Ying-Chi studio. He's also the person in charge of Moonlit Night City. Go find him and let him take responsibility. There's such a thing? Yun Jong-moo's brother was happy to hear this. This was really a case of settling old and new grudges at the same time. What about Ao Tian's people? Who knows? There's an 80% chance that they're related. Let's kill them on sight. Yun Jong-moo casually said. On this point, he and Sword Demon were very different. Sword Demon definitely wouldn't act so indiscriminately, but Yun Jong-moo didn't care that much. On their side, they were currently discussing whether or not they should chase up the mountain and take care of all the fellows from the studio. With their strength, they could definitely do this. However, because they were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, even if they could do it, there would still be many casualties. Yun Jong-moo had also lost many of his brothers today. Moreover, they were all his closest and most trusted brothers. Can you do it alone? Han family young master asked Gu Fei. Do you want to tire me to death? Gu Fei said. You're saying you're tired after piking a few people? Han family young master asked back. The surrounding people all sucked in a breath of air. Was that a few people? That was a few hundred. Piking isn't too bad. The tiredness will come later. Piking is worth it, do you understand? Gu Fei said. How many PK points do you have now? Han family young master asked. 176. Gu Fei glanced at it and said. Yun Jong-moo and the others all gave Gu Fei a thumbs up. This was a true man, a true hero. Is there no limit to the PK points? The team started a discussion. Will it reach a certain point where even the system can't bear to watch and directly destroy it with a bolt of lightning? Don't talk nonsense. 176 points? How are we going to deal with this? There shouldn't be any other way up the mountain from here, right? We'll temporarily guard here and wait for your guild's reinforcements to arrive. Then, we'll catch them all in one fell swoop. Han family young master was naturally ruthless. He didn't want to let go of these enemies that he knew were right in front of him. Yun Jong-moo, on the other hand, was even more ruthless than him. When he heard this idea, he felt that it was safer and repeatedly nodded his head in agreement. Thus, the group of people stood guard on the mountain road. Not long after, the group of people that looked like passers-by gradually approached. Both sides sized each other up. The more they looked, the more familiar they felt. Fuck! Finally, Yun Jong-moo and one of the people in the opposing team saw each other at the same time. After they shouted together, they immediately waved their hands and ordered the team to prepare for battle. So it's you, grandson. You actually dare to come to Moonlit City. I think you're tired of living, Yun Jong-moo shouted. Fuck you, don't think too highly of yourself. I'm going to Moonlit City. But you, grandson, what are you doing sneakily blocking this road? Someone in the opposing team cursed. Gu Fei and Han family young master saw the person who shouted. They also felt that he looked familiar, but couldn't remember who he was. At this moment, the person who rushed out was actually Tsubasa's Sakuratsuka. Don't rush, don't rush, don't rush, it might be a misunderstanding. What are you shouting for? Hide behind me. Yun Jong-moo didn't know who Tsubasa's Sakuratsuka was. He felt that this guy didn't know about their past grudges. Hey, it's you kid. The person who came recognized Tsubasa's Sakuratsuka. He looked around and saw Gu Fei and Han family young master. Qianli Izue? He called out. I do know him. I thought he looked familiar. Gu Fei walked out, but he was still trying to figure out who this person was. Yeah, it's Mang Mang's friend. Tsubasa's Sakuratsuka walked to Gu Fei's side. Oh, right, it's that magician. Gu Fei suddenly understood, but he still couldn't remember his name. He quietly asked Tsubasa's Sakuratsuka, what's his name again? Lan. Tsubasa's Sakuratsuka said. Fuck you. Lan was furious. I did it on purpose. Tsubasa's Sakuratsuka complacently whispered to Gu Fei. He didn't have a good impression of this friend of Mang Mang's. Childish. Gu Fei looked at him in disdain. Mang Mang told them to come help you. Tsubasa's Sakuratsuka actually knew what was going on. Oh, how come I didn't know? Gu Fei was surprised. She didn't tell you? Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was also surprised. Gu Fei quickly understood. Mang Mang's style of doing things was extremely similar to Yun Zhongmu's. He directly pulled people over to help and didn't even inform you. It was just like how Yun Zhongmu directly brought people to Cloud City before contacting Gu Fei. Gu Fei hurriedly sent a message to Mang Mang to confirm this statement. Lan Yi met Qianli Izue here. He scanned the crowd but didn't see Mang Mang, so he also sent her a message. Chapter 799. Eternal life amidst the flower's previous job was to harass and tease. This job required speed, and as a cleric, of course, wasn't suitable for this job, so he didn't follow them. But at least she knew that Gu Fei and the others were in big trouble. After leaving the bonfire party, she sent a message to Lan Yi and asked him to bring some people to help. For a time, Cloud Twilight still knew how to consider the opinions of the majority of the guild members, but the vast Mang Mang didn't think so much. In her eyes, 1,000 miles drunk and the others were all friends. Friends naturally had to support each other. Now that a friend was in trouble, she naturally had to use all the strength she could to help. As for Lan Yi and the others, Boundless Mang only needed to send a message. She didn't ask anything else and immediately set off. However, Whitestone City was 2 cities away from Cloud City, so she naturally came late. As a result, she coincidentally bumped into Gu Fei and the others. Gu Fei and Lan Yi were both sending messages to Boundless Mang, but the problem was different. Gu Fei was asking for Lan Yi's help, while Lan Yi didn't doubt that he was here to help Qianli. He was asking why Yun Zhongmu was here. Boundless Mang gave an answer. Gu Fei confirmed that Yun Zhongmu was here to help Qianli. Boundless Mang could roughly guess that they were here to help Qianli. If Lan Yi and Yun Zhongmu were to start a fight, then calling him over would only make things worse. As a result, he quickly reminded Lan Yi to control his emotions and settle the matter first. It wouldn't be too late to find an opportunity to deal with Yun Zhongmu later. Gu Fei received the message quickly. Seeing that Lan Yi's head was still lowered, he knew that he was still in contact. But not long after, Lan Yi also raised his head and glanced at Yun Zhongmu. Today is business, so I won't argue with you. You think I'm afraid of you? Just wait until business is done and see how I'll deal with you. Yun Zhongmu understood the big picture. If the 2 sides were to fight, then it would only cause more trouble for Qianli. From this, it could be seen that they really cared about their friends. Just don't run away when the time comes. Lan Yi was still talking back. Whoever runs is a coward, Cloud Twilight retorted. Even if you don't run, you're still a coward. Fuck you. I'm your ancestor. The 2 of them were not prepared to fight, but their mouths were not idle. They kept on cursing, inciting the members of both sides to curse each other. However, Yun Zhongmu's side had suffered heavy casualties. Right now, there were only 60 or so people left. They couldn't compare to Lan Yi's side, which had close to 300 people who were still full of energy. The more Yun Zhongmu cursed, the more he felt like he was at a disadvantage. Just because he shouted, the other side could retaliate with 5 times the amount. He immediately felt indignant and gradually lost his cool. His hand was already on his saber, ready to dash forward. At this time, Gu Fei finally stood up and waved his hands. Don't argue, don't argue. Gu Fei's words were more or less effective. Both sides lowered their voices and did not stop talking. When they suddenly realized that Gu Fei was touching his sword, they immediately shut their mouths. Why don't we vent our anger on those guys on the mountain? Gu Fei suggested. Oh, there are enemies on the mountain? Lan Yi and the others came from afar. They had seen the PK going on at the entrance of the mountain, but they didn't know that they were here to help, so they didn't pay much attention to it. There are. Gu Fei said. Let's go. Lan Yi waved his hand. Whenever we see someone, we get angry. Let's go together and quell our anger. Let's go quell our anger. Lan Yi's brothers supported their boss and shouted together. I don't think you're just going to surrender. You want to get killed, right? It was impossible for Yun Zhongmu not to talk back. I think you're the one who's going to be killed. Why are there so few people? Where's your 4,000 people? Lan Yi turned around and mocked. Yun Zhongmu was about to shout again. Gu Fei saw that this wouldn't end, so he rushed forward and waved his sword. Follow me. Yun Zhongmu swallowed his words and rushed up the mountain with Gu Fei. Lonnie didn't want to be outdone either. He waved his hand, and those with speed in the team rushed forward. The PK hadn't started yet, so let's have a race first. The two teams cursed as they ran, but they resisted the urge to fight. They pushed and shoved each other up the mountain. Amethyst and Flower Man were stunned when they saw these two teams. They didn't know what their relationship was. The Black Dragon Mountain range spanned across the Cloud and Night Moon cities. There were some bored people who tried to cross the mountain range, but the result was that there was an insurmountable mountain peak in between, so it was impossible to cross. Ing Chi's people ran up the mountain. Other than teleporting, there was no other way out. Gu Fei led his people up the mountain. He could see Ing Chi's people running into the depths of the mountain range, so he chased after them without a second word. With a strong killer like Gu Fei, Yun Zhongmu and the other agility classes were confident. They didn't care if they had the help of a priest, so they chased after them. Some of them could actually run faster than Gu Fei, but Gu Fei was the leader, so they followed behind him. Gu Fei was the first to catch up to the enemy. Those who were lagging behind were the classes with short legs, so they didn't have the will to fight anymore. After being caught up, they turned around and tried to defend themselves before being killed by Gu Fei. Beautiful! Yun Zhongmu praised. He admired Gu Fei's swift and clean killing methods. Boss, you guys kill them too. Do you want my PK points to be over 200 before you're happy? Gu Fei added some more PK points. He had a headache just thinking about how many he would have to kill later. Understood, understood. I'm killing. Yun Zhongmu said as he caught one and killed it. He immediately felt a disdainful gaze sweeping over him. He turned around and saw that Lan Yi's group had already killed 3 people. Fuck, Rice Bucket, what are you doing? Get your spirits up and kill. Yun Zhongmu urged his subordinates. However, they were already at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. Lan Yi's brothers were all from Moonlit Night City, and they used to be experts. Now, they wouldn't be too far behind. They had the advantage in numbers, so of course they could kill faster than Yun Zhongmu. They didn't mention their advantage, and as they killed, they muttered, "Heh, another one. How many is this?" As they counted, they looked at Yun Zhongmu provocatively. Yun Zhongmu was so angry that he kept shouting. However, he didn't have many people, so he could only kill even more ferociously. Lan Yi's side had the advantage in numbers. If they lost, they would be looked down upon even more, so they didn't dare to relax. They didn't care about where Gu Fei was, and just kept chasing after their target. Ing Chi's people were extremely depressed. They had discovered Lan Yi's men early on, so they knew that they weren't theirs. They thought that they were reinforcements from Yun Zhongmu's 10 Meetings Alliance. Plus, the other side had already left the dangerous mountain path. They couldn't beat them, and if they ran, the reinforcements would stop them. They had no choice but to go up the mountain and head deeper into the unknown mountain range. They could only hope that when Gu Fei's group caught up, they would lose their patience. Who would have thought that these people would be so ruthless? They didn't know where they were, but they were still chasing after them. The last member of Ing Chi's group couldn't escape, and was surrounded by several players. They shouted as they killed, "Ours, ours." "Fuck you, I was the one who stabbed you first." "Bullshit, my arrow was the one who got hit first." "My knife." "My arrow." "Let him speak." Thus, a group of people showed mercy, and picked up the poor Ing Chi player and threw him to the side. "Speak, who got hit first by the arrow or the knife?" The Ing Chi player looked at the group of bandits, and finally cried, "Big brother, let me die." The people on both sides saw that they couldn't get an answer, so they looked around, and one of them suddenly shouted, "It belongs to whoever kills him." As soon as he said that, the arrows and knives all shot forward. The Ing Chi player closed his eyes in happiness. He could finally die. Although Yun Zhongmu and the others tried very hard, they were at a disadvantage in numbers. They couldn't catch up, and their faces were gloomy. How could Lan Yi's people let him go, and asked, "Boss Yun, how many did you kill?" "Che, you kill people every day, who would count how many you killed?" "Ignorant." Yun Zhongmu expressed his disdain. I don't need you to count, just look at your PK points. Why don't you go find Qianli and get drunk? When Qianli gets drunk, how many can he kill? Lan Yi and the others didn't know Gu Fei's foundation, so they chased after Gu Fei and didn't kill many. At this time they arrived and looked around. That's it. That's it. Just nice, this brother here wants to know how many PK points you have. Yun Zhongmu said. 180. Gu Fei asked. Lan Yi's people's jaws dropped to the ground, and one of them said, You're lying, right? Country bumpkin, you haven't seen the world, and you're talking about PK points? Scram. Yun Zhongmu said proudly, as if the 180 PK points belonged to him. If there's nothing else, let's go. Gu Fei didn't care about this and turned to leave. The legend of PK 180 spread through Lan Yi's group, and all the players looked at Gu Fei, their eyes filled with fear. Thinking about how they were defeated by this person in the past, it wasn't considered a humiliation. When they came down the mountain, they were just in time to catch up with Yun Zhongmu's group. They were all filled with killing intent, and were loudly shouting where their target was. Yun Zhongmu wanted to point at Lan Yi, but he held himself back, and said indifferently, That's it, I killed them all. Boss, you only have so few people left? Yun Zhongmu had brought out 198 people, and at this time, there were only 62 left. It was a very small number, and could be seen at a glance. When Yun Zhongmu heard this, he was furious. What nonsense are you saying, Scram? After scolding, he sneaked a glance at Lan Yi, and sure enough, that brat was looking at him with a sneer. Yun Zhongmu wanted to kick that bastard who helped him count to death. How's the situation in the city? Yun Zhongmu changed the topic. In-cheese shops have all been closed, and now we're searching everywhere for Proud Heaven's people to kill. Boss, I think this is a bit rash. Proud Heaven has some connections, and if we kill them all, won't the whole city revolt? The one who spoke was also an old member of the Ten Societies Alliance, and he had witnessed the rise and fall of the various guilds in Moonlit Night City. Times were different now. In the era of the guilds in the past, the number of players was still small, and most of them were scattered. That was why there was a situation where a single guild dominated the entire city. However, there were many top-tier guilds in every main city, and there were many groups of players. Even Hengming and Ming were working together, so even though the 10 Guilds Alliance was many times stronger than the former Dust Guild, its hegemonic position in Moonlit Night City was not as good as it was in the past. How could they simply say that they were going to wipe out a guild? Even Yun Zhongmu was very cautious about such a tyrannical thing. He didn't want to repeat the mistakes of the past and provoke the entire city to go against them. Moreover, the players were alive, and the world map was becoming clearer and clearer. This city was too easy to bully, and they could just go to another main city to play. Yun Zhongmu also didn't want Moonlit Night City to become a ghost city, so he restricted his subordinates more and more, and maintained a good relationship with many of the guilds in Moonlit Night City. Of course, there were also guilds that weren't on good terms, such as Proud Emperor and Weeds, but Yun Zhongmu never said that he would completely wipe them out. Today, however, he completely tore apart all pretense of cordiality and ordered the entire city to hunt them down. This wasn't an impulsive decision from Yun Zhongmu. When he discovered that Proud Emperor was in charge of a gaming studio, he couldn't go easy on this guild. Old players knew the power of gaming studios, and their methods weren't just limited to PvP between players. Proud Heaven was actually a guild supported by a gaming studio, and it had already grown to such a large scale. This was too scary, and he had to use this opportunity to suppress them. Coincidentally, Qianli wasn't on good terms with Ingqi Studio, and he was helping them while also achieving his own goals, so why not? So when this player said that the entire city was going to rebel, Yun Zhongmu could only look down on his ignorance, and said with a wave of his hand, "No more words, kill." Boss. Yun Zhongmu ignored him, and suddenly pointed at Lan Yi. Remember this ugly face, after this, we still have to kill him. There were a lot of new players in the 10 Guild Alliance, and there were too many who didn't recognize Lan Yi. At this time, Yun Zhongmu's side had more than 1,000 players, and they had a huge advantage in numbers. Lan Yi didn't show any fear, and just glanced at Yun Zhongmu. "Look at you, grandson." The 1,000 players were in an uproar. They had been in the 10 Guild Alliance for a long time, and they had seen their guild leader and his own brothers scolding each other, but they had never seen an outsider who dared to mock them in front of their faces. This time, they were about to pull out their swords and fight. This time, there was no need for Gu Fei to stop them. As Yun Zhongmu raised his hand to stop them, "Everyone, don't be impatient. Let's divide the grudges between old and new, and first come first served. Killing this kind of person first will give him face, and he'll be at the back of the queue." When the crowd heard their guild leader speak, they quietened down, and a few voices of agreement could be heard. Just as Lan Yi was about to open his mouth and mock the 1,000 players, Gu Fei moved to his side first, and bitterly smiled, "Brother, let's not argue." Both sides were here to help him, and they were all Qianli's journey of several hours. If they all died here, Gu Fei would feel very apologetic. However, with these people's tempers, it was impossible for them to hold hands and become good friends. If they wanted to fight, then fight. Gu Fei only hoped that they wouldn't bring disaster to both sides because they came to help him. Seeing Gu Fei jump out to stop them, Lan Yi endured it for a while. Yun Zhongmu was now more tactful, and he knew that arguing would only put Gu Fei in a difficult position, so he hurriedly ordered the guild to temporarily not clash with both sides. The two sides immediately quieted down, and Yun Zhongmu waved his hand, "Return to the city." He led the 1,000 players to open the way. Lan Yi asked Gu Fei, "You guys are also going to Moonlit Night City, right?" Gu Fei nodded his head. "You can't stay in clouds any longer?" Honestly speaking, Lan Yi felt a bit of schadenfreude. This was retribution. Back then, they were also destroyed because of Qianli's drunken interference. They couldn't stay in Moonlit Night City anymore, so they had to leave. Now, it was finally this guy's turn. However, this guy was Boundless Wilderness friend now, so he should give him some face and not laugh at him. Lan Yi's heart thumped. The situation over at Clouds is a bit complicated. Our people are all in prison, so let's go play around in the main city first. We'll have the people over there defend to the death and grind down their patience. Gu Fei said. "So that's how it is." Lan Yi nodded his head. "Then when do we counterattack?" "Let's see. But I need to wash off this PK first." Gu Fei was distressed. 180 points? Lan Yi asked. Gu Fei nodded his head. "Damn, how do you wash that? Why haven't the guards come to arrest you?" Lan Yi asked. "We haven't reached the main city yet. But if we keep going, I think we'll be there soon." Gu Fei looked into the distance. "Then what are you going to do?" Lan Yi was extremely curious about what to do with 180 PK points. "I can only fly to the wanted mission office and lead the guards to kill me," Gu Fei said. Everyone who heard this was speechless. In their minds, they imagined a group of system guards chasing after them, wanting to cut them down. At this time, the Han family young master wanted to say something but stopped himself. Actually, he was thinking that since Gu Fei had a warrant that allowed him to search for a name and directly accept a mission, why not let Yun Zhongmu send out some people to accumulate 180 PK points and let Guam Fei wash them off? Then they could just sit in prison and sacrifice some time. The Han family young master reckoned that if he brought this up, Yun Zhongmu wouldn't have much of a problem. The bigger problem was that Gu Fei probably wouldn't accept this idea. This guy always brought a lot of trouble wherever he went, but he didn't want to cause trouble for people. He was also terrifyingly stubborn. This method probably wouldn't work. Gu Fei didn't walk forward anymore. He started flipping through the scrolls in his pocket, trying to figure out which wanted mission office to go to. This was going to be very difficult. Gu Fei felt that going to an unfamiliar main city would be even more difficult. It was better to find a place he was familiar with. As he flipped through the scrolls, he suddenly received a message. It was Drifting. "I'm back. Where are you guys?" "You just came back? We went to Moonlit Night City. It's not that easy to wash 20 PK points. Do you think I'm you? You went to Moonlit Night City to wash PK points?" Drifting replied. "How did you know?" "Of course. The wanted mission office is in an uproar right now. They're all talking about the guy who's rushing all the way to the top 200. I knew it was you." 180, that's a bit difficult. Gu Fei had tears streaming down his face. You don't need to go to the wanted mission office. You can just accept a mission and finish it in one go, right? Drifting said. Then you have to know the name. Name? I'll go get it for you. How about we all get the name of our opponents? Drifting said. What do you want to do? Information room. Drifting said. Chapter 800. Drifting came back. In fact, it was Gu Fei's idea to leave the guild. When they were surrounded, there were 4 people in the group who had more than 20 PK points. Gu Fei, Sword Demon, Drifting, and Slender Waist Dance. Gu Fei, who was always immersed in the bounty quests, knew that those who had more than 20 PK points would lose 2 levels even if they were sent to jail. At that time, he was prepared to send everyone to jail, but it was better to avoid losing 2 levels. So, he messaged Drifting and told him to temporarily leave the guild. At that time was tight. Gu Fei did not have the time to explain to Sword Demon and the others one by one, and it was even more impossible for him to say anything in the guild channel. So, Drifting left, and Slender Waist Dance left safely with Amethyst people. Gu Fei's bounty quests wiped out all of his PK points. Only Sword Demon was left. Sword Demon could not leave the guild. As a very overpowered guild leader at that time, if he chose to leave, the newly formed guild would most likely disband on the spot. Even if there was no such problem, Gu Fei reckoned that Sword Demon would not use the excuse of leaving to escape, so he did not tell him about it. Besides, at that time, Gu Fei thought that it would be better for experts like Yutian Shinming and Azure Blade to leave first. He knew that as long as the guild was not disbanded, the enemy would not give up. The battle would continue for a while, and with so many experts out there, it would be a powerful force. But at that time, Gu Fei did not dare to do so, because these people were the pillars supporting the guild. They would definitely not leave the guild now. With them as the foundation, Gu Fei would be able to stay away from the minimum requirement of 20 players. However, if they all left, Gu Fei wouldn't have any confidence in the others. If the others saw that the experts had all left, they would immediately scatter like the monkeys when the tree falls. If that happened, the guild would also be doomed. Gu Fei understood all these thoughts in an instant, so out of everyone else, he only sent Drifting the message. Drifting was also calculating his own losses. He was hesitant. He didn't expect Qianli to think about this when he was drunk. He was surprised, but he left the guild without hesitation. Due to the lack of explanation, Yutian Shinming and the others started cursing at them. Even if they wanted to explain, they didn't have the chance to. They were all sent to prison. After Drifting left, he naturally brought along Right Love with left hand and Right Handsome with right hand. Then he took the teleportation scroll and temporarily left the Cloud City to clear his PK points. For an average player, especially a short-legged player like Drifting, it wasn't easy to clear all 20 PK points without the help of a wanted quest item. Drifting had only just cleared all of his PK points. He then flew back to Cloud City while contacting Gu Fei. 180 PK points. When Drifting turned in his last quest, he saw it on the World Wanted list. At that time, the Wanted quest office was as lively as an auction house. Many people didn't come for the quest. They heard that a PK maniac was constantly challenging the world record, so they all came to witness the birth of a new record. Of course, they couldn't help but guess who this person was. Drifting listened to a few words of discussion and felt that there was no suspense. Out of 10 people, 8 or 9 believed that it was Qianli who was drunk. Of course, this wasn't wrong. It could only be Qianli who was drunk. When Gu Fei heard Drifting say, "Data room," he immediately became excited. During the City War quest, he was fortunate enough to read through the information room. In the player's information, equipment wasn't recorded, but levels, classes, and guilds were all there. In there, it was indeed possible to dig up all the members of the Black Alliance. You can accept more quests. When the time comes, we'll decide based on the coordinates. Don't kill those in the city. Go to the leveling area outside the city. That way, no guards will come to disturb you. When you've killed enough, return to the main city and hand them all in one go. Damn, this is too convenient. Drifting was a bit envious, even though he didn't have a hobby for wanted quests. Very good. Let's do that. Go and copy down the player lists of Black Alliance and Mud Cloud Guild. I'll wait for you outside Cloud City, said Gu Fei. Drifting shivered. 2 guild lists, more than 2,000 names. Searching and copying, Drifting felt that he was really cheap. Why did he have to do such a thing? After Gu Fei finished speaking, he started flipping through the teleportation scroll. He shouted, "Hey, help me look. Which one is the coordinate of the wild in Cloud City?" After he shouted, no one responded. He raised his head and saw that when he messaged Drifting, they were already far away. No one stayed to care about his PK points. Gu Fei was depressed. He immediately chased after them and grabbed a bunch of teleportation scrolls. He asked Han Family Young Master which one was the wild in Cloud City. "What are you doing?" Gu Fei and Drifting were talking in private, so the others obviously didn't know about his plan. Drifting can provide all the guild lists. "Since we're going to clean up anyway, why don't we just take their people?" said Gu Fei. "Oh, how does he know?" asked Han Family Young Master as he started to think about the value of this thing. Because of his faction, he can go in and out of the information room in the conference hall. "He can find this information there," said Gu Fei. The people around him pricked up their ears. What faction? What information room? They were all players, so why was there such a big difference? Why was it that the others already had access to content that they hadn't even heard of, but they were still walking in circles? "That's not bad," Han Family Young Master said as he took the pile of coordinates from Gu Fei. This guy was obviously very talented in coordinates. After a while, he picked one out and said, "This? Aren't you an idiot? You actually left a scroll of coordinates outside the city." "Maybe it fell in a corner of my pocket and I forgot to use it," said Gu Fei. "Then let's split up. You go back to Cloud City and continue to cause trouble for the guilds. I'll go to Moonlight City and help them fight with the studio," said Han Family Young Master. "Help or provoke?" asked Gu Fei. "Both." Han Family Young Master nodded and waved his hand as he left. Gu Fei patted the scroll, and the teleportation circle activated. He flew back to Cloud City. 180 PK points. "I wonder if anyone will accept this mission?" Gu Fei thought about this and felt that he had to be on guard. He understood the whims of players. Every time there was a strange phenomenon, there would always be players with rich imagination who would imagine that it was a special super mission. With his shocking 180 PK points, it was hard to guarantee that no one would think that there would be a super reward for completing this mission. But 180 PK points. If I really complete this mission, the reward will be really super. Gu Fei, who often issued wanted quests, was able to estimate what kind of EXP and monetary rewards a target with 180 PK points would get if he completed it. Even he was a little tempted by it. "I wonder if I can accept it?" Gu Fei was infected by playing too many games. He was also a little whimsical. He took out the wanted license and wanted to search his name. After filling in 2 words, he suddenly began to hesitate. If he accepted himself, what if the shameless system saw it as him surrendering and directly sent him to prison? 180 PK points, 180 hours, 7 days and 5 hours. After thinking about it, Gu Fei chose to be cautious. This experiment should be done when he had 1 PK point. Gu Fei wandered in the wild, waiting for Drifting's message. He thought it would take some time, but he didn't expect that after wandering for a while, he received Drifting's message. He opened it and saw a few names. "Black?" asked Gu Fei. "Yes, I'll send you the message and you can try it out." "It will save time," said Drifting. "Yes, make a copy of the name list," said Gu Fei. At $% and Drifting thought that he could use the message to avoid doing it himself, but he didn't expect that Gu Fei still wouldn't let him go. "I'm not brother you," Drifting thought with tears streaming down his face. He sent the 2 guys who wrote love with his left hand and handsome with his right hand to do it. The 2 of them were also very depressed and listless. Drifting sent 5 names for each message. Later, he wasn't satisfied, so he changed it to 10, 15, 20. Gu Fei then tried one by one in the wanted license. Those with no PK points tried for nothing, but those with PK points immediately entered the quest list. Gu Fei looked at the current coordinates and compared them to the wanted coordinates. He could roughly determine the distance and direction. Some were in the city, so he ignored them. Those outside the city, he immediately began to move in that direction. The leveling area for players over level 40 was quite far from the main city, so he wasn't afraid of the guards chasing him to this extent. Gu Fei was full of energy. He continued to accept Drifting's messages and try his ID. The number of wanted quests in the quest list increased. However, before the target he was originally chasing, a new one appeared. Gu Fei found that it was very close to him. He immediately walked in the direction of the coordinates and went around a small hill. He immediately saw a team of people sweating profusely as they leveled up. Gu Fei immediately felt a headache coming on. They were a team. If he wanted to attack a target, the others would help him. This target only had 1 PK point, but their team had 9 people. If he refreshed his PK points and increased his PK points by 8, would this matter be over? Fight and then run? The other team also had archers and thieves. Generally, people at this level would be faster than Gu Fei. If they recklessly chased after him and killed 2 of them, he would still have 1 more PK point. It would still be a loss. Gu Fei thought about it, but the result was that he would vomit blood. He hesitated. He stood there stupidly, but the team noticed him first. They seemed to be very careful and walked closer and closer to Gu Fei. Finally, a voice blurted out, "Qianli is drunk." But as soon as he finished shouting, someone immediately covered his mouth and pretended that nothing had happened with a flustered expression. Gu Fei was startled and suddenly thought of a problem. If the target was either Black Alliance or Muyun Guild, then the people who were leveling up with him were most likely from these 2 guilds. Although killing them would increase his PK points, it would also be a punishment for these 2 guilds. Also, when someone called out his name, the others were clearly panicking. If they weren't from these 2 guilds, why were they so afraid when they saw him? It had to be said that Gu Fei's last thought was a little wishful thinking. Those who didn't know him would be nervous and afraid when they met him. In the eyes of the players, he was a PK maniac. He had 180 PK points. But at this moment, after analyzing the real identity of this group of people, Gu Fei didn't hesitate anymore. Without saying anything, he swung his sword and charged forward. After those people recognized Gu Fei, and some even blurted out, they were already very nervous. 9 people? This was nothing. For a drunk Qianli, this was just a side dish. He pretended that he didn't know and called for reinforcements. When the others came, they would surround and attack together. At this moment, the people in the team were all complaining about the guy who shouted out. At the same time, they hoped that Qianli was drunk and didn't hear them. At this moment, they wanted to quietly move away. Unexpectedly, Qianli was drunk and charged forward without saying anything. The 9 people in the team were too weak. They shouted and scattered in all directions. The thief and archer were especially fast. As they ran, they turned around and shouted, "Break up into parts! Break up into parts!" The few with short legs were so angry that they vomited blood. If they scattered and ran, Qianli could at most chase one of them. Indeed, most of the people had a chance to escape. But no matter what, some of them with short legs would definitely be killed. The 2 who were fast didn't face any risk. At this moment, they were naturally very happy to break up into parts. As expected, Gu Fei ignored the 2 who ran fast and went straight for the warrior in the team. The warrior shouted, "Stick together and hold on." The others replied, "Good luck, brother." In a flash, they ran in the direction furthest from the warrior. "No sense of loyalty, you bunch of useless things." The warrior scolded. "Unnecessary sacrifice is a waste. Today's retreat is for tomorrow's greater progress." The people who abandoned the warrior were still murmuring. The warrior raised his sword to meet Gu Fei with tears streaming down his face. The fight didn't have any exciting process. Very calmly, he was killed by Gu Fei. But when he revived, he found that he was not at the resurrection point, but in prison. Wanted quest. The warrior was overjoyed. Compared to dropping 2 levels, being in prison was more comfortable. Looking around, he found that there was still a thief sitting quietly in the corner of this cell. Life in prison was boring. They could only rely on players to communicate with each other to pass time. The warrior immediately went up and asked with the same opening line of his cellmates, "Brother, how many hours?" 39. The other person replied quietly, "Ah." The warrior's mouth opened wide. With such high PK, he definitely didn't turn himself in. He was most likely sent here. The warrior immediately thought of a person and continued to curry favor with him. "Were you sent here by Qianli when he was drunk?" The other person nodded. The warrior immediately found a common topic and began to curse at Qianli when he was drunk. However, that person only looked at him quietly, neither smiling nor speaking. Is he mad? The warrior thought silently. He looked at the strange person again and quietly squatted to the side. Gu Fei completed a quest and saw that the others had actually scattered. This situation was different from what he had imagined. He had thought that a quest would attract a group of people to fight to the death. When that time came, he would have to reduce 1 PK point and gain 8 PK points. Who knew that these guys would scatter just like that? If he continued to chase after them, he would be taking the initiative to gain PK points. Should he or should he not? Gu Fei was extremely conflicted, but after thinking about it, he felt that he couldn't miss this opportunity to attack the other guild. This wasn't the time to be soft-hearted and care about PK points. Kill he had to kill. Gu Fei stared at a target and chased after him. With his short legs, it was only a matter of time before he caught up to Gu Fei. That person saw that he couldn't escape and stopped in his tracks gloomily. Gu Fei rushed forward and asked, "Which guild are you from?" Gu Fei noticed that the other person didn't wear a guild badge. "Mu Yun," the other person replied. "I won't kill him if he leaves the guild," Gu Fei said. The other person was startled and then hesitated. Of course, the players in the guild knew that Qianli was getting drunk. This was an eye for an eye. He wouldn't kill him if he left the guild. After hesitating for a moment, he finally nodded and said, "He has already left." "What's your name?" Gu Fei asked. "Elephant Stomp," the other person said. "That's an interesting name." Gu Fei smiled and quickly sent a message to Drifting. "Elephant Stomp, search for this person." Drifting was an archmage, but now he was like a clerk and was constantly ordered around by Gu Fei. He was furious, but he couldn't disobey. He flipped through the information he was reading and replied, "Level 41 player, Paladin from Muyun's guild." "What's wrong?" "Also from Muyun's guild?" "Yes." "Are you sure?" "Yes." "What's wrong?" "Look again." "What the hell are you talking about?" "What's wrong?" "He's going to die." "Oh." Drifting continued to work. "Childish. Do you think you can fool me? You didn't retreat at all." Gu Fei criticized Elephant Stomp, raised his sword, and killed him. Elephant Stomp didn't even understand. How did this guy suddenly know that he was lying? Spy? There must be a spy. Elephant Stomp hurried to report to the guild master. There was a spy in his guild or he had been bought. "I was sold by him." Elephant Stomp cried bitterly. "Otherwise, I wouldn't have died. Guild master, you have to help me." I know. Unchung Mutsu was annoyed. Qianli had started to attack his guild when he was drunk. As for the spy in his guild, was it still a secret? If a guild didn't have 8 or 10 spies, it would be too embarrassing to admit that it was a big guild. It was just that Very Against the Heavens had only been established for a short period of time, yet it had already carried out this move so quickly and efficiently. This surprised Moody a little. In his memory, the people in his guild had joined Unchung Mutsu before Unchung Mutsu. Bribe, they could only be bribed. Those guys were rich. Unchung Mutsu thought. This guy, what does he want? Black Index Finger and the other guild masters were having a headache. They were annoyed that Qianli had left Moonlit Night City. However, the players who received the mission of Drunk Qianli with 180 PK value found that his coordinates had returned to Cloud City. Everyone was annoyed that he had returned. At this time, they had already started to organize people to surround and kill Qianli. They didn't expect him to take the initiative first. Could it be that he predicted that we'd be taking turns? That's why he's out in the wild to attack us? If that's the case, he might not be the only one who came back. Damn, tell the people who are training in the wild to gather. Don't scatter. Damn, if this goes on, how are we going to play the game? Chapter 801. The guild leaders' hearts were filled with sorrow. They were the ones who caused this trouble, but they didn't have the courage to bear the consequences. In the end, it was Black Index Finger who shouted, "Brothers, now that things have come to this, we can only persevere. Unite as one and defeat Qianli. Otherwise, no one will have a good life." Black Index Finger's last sentence had a hint of threat. It was obvious that he was hinting that even if they backed out now, they wouldn't be able to escape responsibility. Actually, the guild leaders had already seen Black Index Finger's shamelessness. They weren't surprised to hear him say this. They just sighed and hoped that their days would come to an end soon. The most important thing right now is to quickly gather all the manpower and encircle and annihilate 1,000 Miles Drunk. Now that he has so many PK points and is within our sphere of influence, this is an opportunity for us. Unchung Mutsu looked like he was grasping for an opportunity, but he was actually panicking inside. As expected, after Black Alliance, their guild had also been exposed. Qianli's claws had already reached out to them. This was too scary. According to the reports from the informants in Black Alliance, there were already some people in Black Alliance who were feeling uneasy. When the guild leader's PK dropped below 40, the guild members were threatened with leaving the guild several times. At this moment, there were already people making preparations for this. And from the stomping of the elephant, Unchung Mutsu also heard Qianli's threat to their guild. Fortunately, the voice hadn't spread yet. They had to eliminate it while it was still in its infancy. If it was like Black Alliance, then the situation would be difficult. The guild leaders were still discussing when news of a group of players being attacked by Qianli's drunk came from the leveling area. Because it was also a leveling team of around 10 people, after using the tactic of breaking up the whole into parts, 6 of them escaped and 3 were killed. 2 of them were also warned that they wouldn't be killed if they left the guild. These 2 used the same trick as the elephant stomping, but were easily seen through by Qianli's drunk and killed. This time, the players who were attacked were from the Black Alliance. The gazes of the guild leaders changed again. This drunk Qianli had been killing people. If he wasn't killing black players, then he was killing Muyun players. Could it be that the bird that pokes its head out will be shot? Drunk Qianli was only going to kill these 2 leaders as a warning to the others? He wasn't going to attack second-rate players like them? While the players were hesitating, Black Index Finger and Unchung Mutsu were thinking hard. Neither of them were slow, and they had noticed something strange in between the 2 attacks. 2 of Mu Yun's men were killed, and 3 of the Black Alliance's men were killed. But why was there no news after each side had 1 man killed? The 2 guild leaders also did not know who the 2 people who had disappeared were. They were currently asking the party that had been attacked about the situation. Naturally, the members of the party knew each other and hurriedly tried to contact the 2 people. However, they soon discovered that they could not get any information. The other party had actually been sent to prison. So this guy is doing a wanted mission? Black Index Finger and Unchung Mutsu said at the same time. He's doing a wanted mission and attacking our people at the same time? How did he know the names of our players so accurately? How did he know the names of the people that we don't even know? Doesn't he need to know the names? Traitor! Fuck! The 2 guild leaders were furious. They hated the traitor who had heartlessly leaked information about the guild at such a crucial moment. However, they had no way to investigate it. At this moment, the 2 of them discussed and gave orders to the players who had PK value in their guild to move quickly. At the very least, they wouldn't be killed by Qianli when he was drunk. The direction that they were moving towards was naturally where there were ambushes in the city. Outside the city, Gu Fei had already attacked 2 groups of people. The enemies didn't want to fight with Gu Fei at all. When they saw him, they immediately scattered in all directions. Gu Fei chased after one, but he couldn't care less about the other. Under the condition that he had to complete the wanted mission first, he killed another 3 people. In total, his PK value could be eliminated by 2 points, but it increased by 3 points. In the end, it increased by 1 point. This result made Gu Fei feel extremely regretful. At this time, with Drifting's help, he had received 34 missions in his quest list, which included 41 PK value. There were always people who had 2 or 3 points. Gu Fei scanned the coordinates of the targets on the list, trying to find the nearest one. The target coordinates were limited to the time when the mission was received. Under the effect of Gu Fei's wind-chasing emblem, it refreshed once per minute. Of course, there was a time when the mission was received, so it was impossible for the coordinates to refresh at the same time. With so many coordinates piled up there, he saw that the coordinates were constantly being refreshed, and it was dazzling. However, from the constantly refreshed coordinates, Gu Fei discovered that the movement range of these coordinates was quite large. Gu Fei was the most experienced wanted hunter in the parallel world. He had chased after these coordinates countless times. Even if Gu Fei did not deliberately pay attention to them, he could still summarize some of the changes. Most players who were leveling up moved around a fixed area, so even if there were changes in coordinates, the changes would be very small. With such a large change in coordinates, it was certain that the target wasn't leveling up, but was moving. If it was only a few coordinates that changed like this, it wouldn't be too strange. However, after paying attention, Gu Fei noticed that this wasn't just a few coordinates, but a large majority of them. Or rather, it was all of them. Gu Fei was still busy looking for the new names that Drifting had provided. Not long after, he added 2 more names. Gu Fei paid attention to these 2 coordinates again, and found that the situation was exactly the same. The other party had stopped leveling up and was being transferred. This was obvious. As for the reason, Gu Fei guessed that it was because of him. After the other party issued a bounty for the other party twice, they began to gather and protect the wanted targets. As for the direction in which they were gathering, Gu Fei couldn't tell. He quickly copied a few coordinates and sent a message to the Han family young master, asking what direction they were moving in. The Han family young master glanced at it and immediately replied, "Back to the city." Back to the city? This wasn't good news for Gu Fei. If he entered the city, the guards would attack him. This was something that he had always been worried about. Unless he had no other choice, Gu Fei actually didn't want to continue in this situation to wash away his PK points. In this situation, I'll just have to catch up to as many as I can. Gu Fei sighed. From the movement of coordinates, it was easy to determine the speed of the other party's movement. For Gu Fei, who often issued bounty quests, this deduction was already at the level where he didn't even need to think. Gu Fei looked at his own coordinates, and quickly ran towards a target that was close but slow. The players of Black Alliance and Shepherd Cloud Guild, who had PK points, weren't very nervous. Instead, they felt lucky. After becoming a wanted target, there was no way he would die at Thousand Miles Drunk's hands. Being attacked by him would only mean going to jail. No matter how many hours of jail time it was still much better than dying and losing 2 levels while PvP. When their guild leader reminded them to quickly wash away their PK points, they all agreed. However, in private, many of them saw this as a protective talisman, a talisman of immortality. What was even sadder was that it wasn't just the players with PK points on them who had the same thought. For example, Trampling the Elephant, who had been killed by Qianli's drunken warrior not long ago, contacted the warrior who had also been killed by Qianli's drunken warrior. He discovered that the warrior hadn't lost a level, but had instead been sent to jail. This outcome depressed Trampling the Elephant greatly. Without PK points, he would lose a level. With PK points, he would just end up in jail. Trampling the Elephant quickly thought of this. Moreover, he knew that Gu Fei's bounty quest required 180 PK points. He had to wash it away, right? According to the latest news, this number was now 183, and Trampling the Elephant had contributed a little to it. Perhaps I should also carry some PK points. Hopefully, after Qianli's drunken warrior accepts my quest, I won't lose a level if he kills me again, Trampling the Elephant thought to himself. Finally, when he discovered a new player on a secluded street, Trampling the Elephant couldn't suppress the impulse in his heart and rushed forward to kill the noob player. I finally have a little bit of PK value. PK points were supposed to be something that players would feel uneasy in the future. However, at this moment, this little bit of PK points gave trampling the elephant a guarantee of his safety. This method should be popularized. Trampling the elephant felt that this was a great discovery. At the same time, he was someone who loved the guild, so he felt that this method was worth popularizing. Therefore, he quickly reported it to the guild leader of Unchung Matsu. When Unchung Matsu first heard it, he was stunned. That's right. If he was wanted by Qianli's drunken warrior, there was nothing to be afraid of. Wasn't it just going to jail? Should I go and get some PK points too? Unchung Matsu quickly had this idea. At the same time, he saw that in the guild channel, Trampling the Elephant was already shouting, "Brothers," and began to promote this method on his own. This method was immediately praised. Many players praised Trampling the Elephant's clever discovery. At the same time, they said that they would immediately kill someone to get some PK points. Unchung Matsu was in a daze as he watched until someone suddenly shouted in the channel, "You idiots! Do you think that if you have PK points, Qianli will definitely accept your wanted quest when he gets drunk? What if he doesn't accept your quest but kills you? What will you do?" Ah! The channel was silent. Fuck, I've already killed someone. Suddenly, there was a scream in the channel. In the game, getting some PK points could be said to be the easiest thing to do. All you had to do was kill someone, and there were players everywhere. The players who thought that this method made sense immediately focused on finding a target to kill. When they were done killing, they returned to the channel to take a look, and were shocked. Idiots! You really are idiots! Unchung Matsu finally reacted and scolded. Chapter 802. On the Shepherd Cloud Guild side, the guild leader, Unchung Matsu, was furious. He scolded the players who took the initiative to apply for PK points. He had completely forgotten that before the voice in the channel, he had also had the urge to kill some noobs to increase his PK points. The channel was gloomy. Unchung Matsu asked who had applied for PK points, and a series of "me" quickly made him dizzy. The great idea of trampling on elephants really deserved its reputation. There were many responses, and in an instant, more than 100 people had applied for PK points. The rest of the people who didn't apply for PK points were all thanks to the quick response of the voice in the channel and the fact that there were no suitable targets around them. More than 100 PK points holders who had appeared out of nowhere didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They just let the guild leader lecture them in the channel. Seeing that the guild leader had no more words to say, someone finally asked weakly, "What do we do now? Aren't you guys safe now? Go and find Qianli to PK." There were people who liked to expose people's shortcomings. Of course, they had to complain at times like this. In the end, it naturally attracted a lot of criticism. In fact, Unchung Matsu also wanted to say this to these people, but he knew that his identity was different. If he spoke so coldly at a time like this, he would lose the trust of the people. In the end, after thinking for a while, he could only say, "Hurry up and clear your PK points." In the end, another voice immediately said, "Guild leader, at this time, most of the targets on the wanted list might be occupied by our people. If we go and accept the mission now." Hearing this, Unchung Matsu was stunned. Normal players could only look at their PK points and their serial number when accepting a mission. They wouldn't know who the target was until they caught up to them. In this situation, it was very likely that they would be able to get their own people. If we go and do the wanted mission, what if we meet Qianli to PK points? Someone else also asked. This was a bigger problem. If more than 100 people wanted to clear their PK points, Unchung Matsu couldn't possibly send 100 people to protect each of them. Moreover, 100 people might not be a match for Qianli to PK points. Let's turn ourselves in. After thinking about it, Yunzhong's Moody felt that this was the safest way. So, a large group of people ran to the prison with tears in their eyes and cried tears of regret for asking for trouble and thinking they were smart. Trampling on Elephants, who came up with this idea, was now even more anxious. He felt that he had made such a big mistake, so it wasn't too much to be kicked out of the guild. However, Muddy Cloud wasn't in the mood to punish the culprit. Black Index Finger had already heard about the mess Muddy Cloud made and was laughing at Muddy Cloud. At the same time, he was glad that Muddy Cloud didn't have a talent like Elephant Stomp. The players who carried the PK points in the city quickly went to the prison to apply for jail time. However, the players outside the city were still hurrying home. The main city had a total of 4 gates: east, west, south, and north. The leveling areas for players above level 40 were mainly located outside of the east and north gates. At this time, although the players in the 2 directions had not communicated with each other beforehand, they were all returning to the main city from the leveling area. Gradually, they arrived at the same path. Everyone silently looked at each other, their thoughts differing. Muyun's players looked a bit awkward. Many of them had asked to fight on their own. As for the Black Alliance, they carried on the spirit of their leader and looked at Mu Yun and the others who were in the same boat as them with disdain. Both sides didn't say anything. They each walked their own way, but their direction was the same, and their footsteps were equally hurried. Along the way, they kept hearing news of people being attacked by Qianli's Drunken. This made them very clear that Qianli's Drunken was determined to hunt them down. He might appear behind them at any moment. They knew this, and the 2 guild leaders were even more aware of it. They had already realized that these people were bait to lure Qianli's Drunken out. They had already called for the other guilds to gather their people and come to their aid. If they discovered Qianli's Drunken, they would be able to counterhunt him. Gathering teams and rushing in this direction required time, especially when their opponent was Qianli's Drunken. The teams with fewer people didn't dare to go there. They had to gather with other teams and form a team of several hundred people. Unchung Mutsu and Black Index Finger tried to persuade the guild leaders. Qianli's Drunken was outside the east gate. Your people are still fucking leveling at the leveling area outside the north gate. How are you going to meet him? If you all rush towards the east gate, won't you naturally form a large army? But no one listened. All the guild leaders seemed to have colluded. They all said that they didn't have the final say in this matter. It was the players in their guilds who didn't want to go there before they gathered enough people. Black Index Finger and Unchung Mutsu gritted their teeth. They couldn't tell if these people were really so ignorant, or if they were deliberately stalling for time. They didn't want to help save the members of the 2 guilds who were being hunted. The 2 were helpless. They could only urge the members of their guilds to gather quickly. These people were from the city and outside the city. Those in the city gathered and rushed outside the city. Those outside the city gathered and rushed inside the city. Those from the north gate rushed to the east gate. In any case, they all had one goal: to counterhunt Qianli's Drunken as soon as possible. But unfortunately, the movement speed of players in a team could only be considered as short legs. Gu Fei alone was much faster than them. All Unchung Mutsu and Black Index Finger heard was bad news. One after another, players were killed by Qianli's Drunken in the wild. Some were sent back to prison, and some were sent back to the respawn point. When their main force gathered, there was no telling how many people they would lose. This wasn't the most terrible thing. What annoyed the 2 the most was the voice that had already spread in the guild: if you quit the guild, you won't be killed. If they couldn't give Qianli's Drunken a head-on blow, the guild members would really lose confidence and start to quit the guild. Then the 2 guilds would really be finished. At this time, Gu Fei kept hunting targets and accepting quests. The number of quests had increased from 34 to 40. He had already completed 7 of them, but because he hadn't turned in the quests, they were still on the list. If he completed all these quests and turned them in, he could get rid of 47 PK points. But along the way, he would get 2 PK points for every team he encountered. As a result, his PK points had now jumped to 197, and he was about to break through 200. At this time, the target coordinates on the list were divided into 2 categories, and they were getting closer and closer. Gu Fei knew that the other party was moving in the same direction under the unified command, and they had gradually formed a path. The path was to the north gate, and it would be too late to rush there now. As for the east gate, Gu Fei raised his head and looked up. He could already see the crowd gathering on the main street of Chaogray City. These players had been paying attention to their surroundings, and were always on guard against the appearance of Qianli's Drunken. When Gu Fei's black figure gradually became clear, countless people were alarmed and shouted, "Qianli's drunken is coming," while reporting to their respective guild leaders. "Unite as one and resist Qianli's drunken." The two guild leaders already knew that their reinforcements wouldn't be able to arrive faster than Qianli's drunken. They had already discussed a strategy to rely on these players to resist and stall for time. They had a very good reason. If Qianli's drunken chased after them, it meant that he had received a quest to capture them. So even if he killed them, he would only go to jail and not die and lose levels. However, once they killed him, they would get 190 PK points, and Qianli's drunken would become a passerby. This reasoning was very reasonable and everyone believed it. Since they knew that they wouldn't die, the fear in their hearts was naturally reduced by half. However, some of the Muyun players who took the initiative to apply for PK points were still a little nervous. They were worried that since Qianli's drunken was so busy, he wouldn't have the time to accept their quest. Not only were there PK players in the team, but there were also some players who were originally leveling together. Of course, they wouldn't continue training on their own after receiving the order to withdraw. At this time, they were also in the team. There were a total of 24 leveling teams from 2 guilds gathered here. Each team had 9 to 15 players, and there were a total of 267 players. This was already a relatively large team, but in the face of Qianli's drunken, the 2 guild leaders could only think of stalling for time. Gu Fei quickly caught up to his opponents. When he saw that they had stopped running and were gathering together to turn around and prepare to fight back, he was shocked. This was the first time that Gu Fei encountered resistance along the way, and he became spirited. He estimated that there were more than 200 people in the team. This was a gathering of leveling teams, so the class distribution was naturally in the best condition. If they cooperated well, they should be quite skilled in a small area. Gu Fei was very calm, and he didn't rush forward. When he was a certain distance away, he stopped. However, when the opponents saw that Qianli was drunk, they were very flustered. At this time, they were just a large gathering of leveling teams. They didn't even have a unified leader, and they were from 2 guilds. In fact, they weren't as united as Gu Fei thought. When they saw that Gu Fei was in range, the archers all decided to start shooting. 267 people. The proportion of classes was about the same, and the total number of archers was only 30 to 40. Gu Fei's kung fu and footwork didn't care about the archers' attacks at all. While dodging and retreating, the archers couldn't help but chase after Gu Fei in order to shoot him. However, someone in the team was calm and hurriedly shouted, "Don't chase after him. It's best if he doesn't dare to come over." The archers heard this and looked back. When they saw that they had already pulled away from the main team, they immediately broke out in a cold sweat. In the battle where Singing Wine was killed by 1,000 players, Qianli got drunk and pretended to run away, leading the archers and thieves away from the team. Then, he turned back and killed them one by one. Although the main team with short legs had hundreds of people, they could only be played to death by Qianli, who had agility, ranged, and high attack. Today, this guy was playing the same old trick again. So close, so close. The archers thought about it and hurriedly returned to their team. In fact, Gu Fei really did have such an idea. However, when he saw that the opponents didn't see through it, and that more than 200 people were still in a defensive position against him, he felt very helpless. The archers were fighting head-on, and behind them were the mages, who had the second highest attack range. These 2 classes were piled in this direction, then what about their sides, or their backs? Gu Fei observed the opponent's formation and suddenly had an idea. Chapter 803. Gu Fei suddenly strode towards the right flank of the enemy formation. This was a very simple movement, but it caused chaos in the other party's formation. Positioning and movement were 2 very important skills in the game. In a team competition, positioning was the foundation, and movement was also to maintain one's position. Using the current situation as an example, archers in the front and archers in the back. This was how the players of the 2 guilds decided to deal with Gu Fei. But now that Gu Fei had suddenly circled to the right flank, in order to maintain this position, they had to move. They had to archers in the front and archers in the back, maintaining the position to the right that Gu Fei circled to. This kind of movement wasn't difficult, and there were many ways to do it. For example, they only needed one row of players to stand still, and all the other players would use that row as the axis and maintain their original formation. This was what the players on the field chose to do. Time was tight, and they needed time to count, so they used the first row of players on the right, which didn't need to be counted, as the axis. The archers at the front followed Gu Fei's footsteps, immediately advancing side by side and turning to the right flank. But behind them, the mages were barely able to move because they didn't have the movement speed of the archers. The closer the players were to the right, the closer they were to the axis, and the less they moved, so there wasn't much difference. But the further to the left they were, the greater the distance they needed to move. This difference in movement speed wasn't something that could be made up for with a bit of effort. The formation of the two guilds became more and more chaotic the further to the left they moved. But Gu Fei didn't stop moving. He was still moving. He maintained a distance of 30 meters from the enemy formation so that he wouldn't step into the attack range of the mages. With this as the radius, he moved accurately. The archers could attack at this distance, but shooting while running made up for it. There was no guarantee of accuracy. Gu Fei's footwork was also strange, and normal people couldn't see through it. In the end, many of the homing arrows missed. Gu Fei used a radius of 30 meters, so he had to move even further. However, his speed helped him make up for this shortcoming. Classes like archers and thieves could easily keep up with Gu Fei's movements. However, Gu Fei's goal wasn't to confuse archers or thieves, but rather other classes with short legs. In order to maintain their position, it wasn't just the archers and mages who had to move. Everyone had to move. As a result, apart from the archers and thieves, everyone else became more and more disorganized due to their lack of speed. However, Gu Fei did not stop and forcefully walked 3 full laps. The players from the two guilds had no time to think. They could only chase after him. Gu Fei's movements were getting faster and faster. They were afraid that if they hesitated, Gu Fei would successfully circle around to their side and attack them at close range. After 3 laps, Gu Fei stopped. The archers breathed a sigh of relief, but when they looked back, their faces turned green. Their positions could be considered neat, but behind them, the more they moved to the left, the more space there was. The short-legged classes were left behind by a large margin. The team was split into 2, spreading out in a fan shape. The 2 teams were like 2 lonely fan ribs. However, Gu Fei had already begun to charge. The archer's interception was still ignored by Gu Fei's swift footwork. The mages who were originally spread out behind them with powerful AoE spells had already fallen behind in the process of circling, and some were knocked unconscious. And Gu Fei chose to break through from the left side of the team. Because of the small movement on the right side of the team, the mages who could keep up with the team hurriedly came over to support, but Gu Fei had already closed in. Teleportation, dual flame flash. The last 6 meters of distance was like nothing to Gu Fei. The mage's attacks fell behind him. Gu Fei flashed into the formation of the archers on the left. A circle of flames rolled out, and this fan rib was immediately cut off. Gu Fei followed the archer's formation and killed straight down, his sword not missing. The short-legged classes that had been left behind were also rushing up at this time, but they were blocked by Gu Fei's wall of electricity. Following that, 2 AoE spells scared everyone into covering their heads and scurrying away. Gu Fei's spell use was too smooth. Although he had mana loop to continuously recover, he still emptied his mana in an instant. Next, he could only use physical attacks, but he was still able to kill the archers. Gu Fei knew that without mana, his lethality wasn't enough. If he killed one archer, he would let even more archers escape. Thus, he used more hooks and sweeps, and the archers would be knocked to the ground after 2 exchanges. Moreover, he had a good sense of direction. When one fell, another would jump down, and when the one below wanted to get up, another would come down from above. The archers didn't have time to run and were piled up by Gu Fei. As soon as his mana recovered, he turned around and used dual flame flash on the archers. Where could the archers even run to? The archers were stacked up by the white light of death, rising more than 2 meters into the air. It was so white that it was dazzling to the eyes. There were more than 30 archers, and in one exchange, Gu Fei had killed 20 of them. The other professions finally surrounded him, but Gu Fei didn't continue fighting. He flung his robe, turned around, and ran. What could those short legs do to Gu Fei? The thieves were fast, but not a single one dared to chase after him. Each and every one of them stared dumbfoundedly at the archers who had already scattered. They all stared at Gu Fei in fear, not daring to shoot any more arrows. Gu Fei ran a distance away, counting his mana while checking his PK value. He had finally broken through the 200 mark. At this moment, his PK value was at 215. After killing 20 people, it had risen by 18 points. This meant that among the archers, there were 2 that were his wanted targets. Truthfully, Gu Fei couldn't see them clearly. Which 2 were they? The players from both guilds were in a daze. They didn't know how to advance or retreat. They only felt that this stalemate was pretty good. They hoped that Qianli would get drunk and stand there forever, never to advance again. However, Gu Fei didn't hear their cries. As soon as his mana was replenished, he immediately turned around and attacked again. The players from both guilds immediately cried. How were they supposed to deal with him? Now that the archers' formation was broken, the threat was even smaller. If they kept going like this, it would be a repeat of the previous situation. The players also thought for a moment and thought of a solution. They immediately protected the mage in the center of the formation. The entire formation didn't move, only letting the archers, who could easily keep up with Gu Fei's footsteps, move with Gu Fei. The mage was in the center. As long as he turned around, he could attack from all directions at any time. However, with this retreat, the attack range was reduced by another 5 meters. But this was still better than the mage going around in circles and not being able to unleash his full power, right? However, this arrangement still felt like something was wrong. Many players faintly had this thought in their hearts, but for a moment, they couldn't think of what it was. But soon they found out. When Gu Fei saw that the mage had entered the center of the formation, he didn't go around anymore. He just swayed left and right to dodge the arrows, looking like he was ready to charge at any time. The archers were all covered in cold sweat. They desperately shot arrows while shouting for the mage to get ready. The mages had already turned in this direction, and the players in front of them all shrank back, afraid to block the mage's line of sight. In the end, Gu Fei just took a few steps forward casually and stopped. Then, with a wave of his sword, he summoned the few spells that the mage could cast one after another. The mages waved their staffs and wanted to attack, but they suddenly froze because Gu Fei hadn't walked into their attack range yet. That's what was wrong. The mage retreated to the center, and the other classes covered the front. So, when Gu Fei could attack these other classes, the mages couldn't attack Gu Fei because the other classes helped them pull away. Of course, Gu Fei couldn't attack the mage, but these other classes and the archers in the front row screamed from the explosions of Gu Fei's spells. They kept shouting, "No, this won't work. This position is wrong." The classes scattered and wanted to push the mage forward, but Gu Fei immediately began to retreat, and his position was already turning in a circle. The players vomited blood. But soon, a guy had an idea and suddenly shouted, "Let's retreat." Retreat? That's right. What's the use of us here? The other players immediately understood. That's right. They couldn't attack Gu Fei, and standing in the formation restricted the mage's movement and attack. If they all retreated and only left the mage there, the mage wouldn't be afraid of turning in a circle and wouldn't lose to Qianli in distance, right? That was the real no blind spot. So we stood in the wrong position. The players regretted and hurriedly withdrew from the formation. Should we stand behind the mage? Are you stupid? What if Qianli attacks us from behind? We can't stand with the mage and the others. Yes, the further the better. The players hurriedly retreated, and then saw a pure team of mages and archers appear in front of them. Why do I feel like something's wrong? I also feel like there's something wrong. What answered them was Gu Fei's action. Gu Fei waited for these guys to leave the formation, and suddenly began to charge with his sword. The archers' attacks were ignored, and the mage's AoE attacks were blocked and teleported, passing through in an instant. Gu Fei was like a flying god, killing in front of this pure formation in an instant. The players finally realized where they had gone wrong. The ranged classes didn't have the protection of the melee classes at all. This was the mistake of a noob that couldn't be any more noob. Under the pressure of 8,000 miles drunk, over 200 self-proclaimed experts had actually made such a comical mistake. The melee classes hurriedly wanted to come and help, but with Gu Fei's killing efficiency, he had already swept up waves of white light. The archers could run because they had speed, but what about the mages? How could there be a mage who could outrun Gu Fei? The mages were in despair. They were going to die anyway. Gritting their teeth, the mages suddenly began to self-destruct. Too cliché. Gu Fei shouted and teleported away. In a flash of fire, the mages of the two major guilds tragically completed their self-destruction. This saves me a lot of PK points and mana. Gu Fei rubbed his nose and looked at his 2 stats again. Chapter 804. The coordinates of Gu Fei naturally stopped moving when he fought with the team. Now that the location was clear, Unchung Mutsu and Black Index Finger immediately contacted all the players to gather here. At the same time, they were also concerned about the progress of the battle. The mages are all dead, and 4/5 of the archers are dead. The two received the painful report and were stunned. They could understand 1,000 miles drunk suppressing over 200 players. However, it was rather abnormal for all of them to die. This was especially true for mages, who had high attack but low HP and poor mobility. They had always been the focus of the team's protection, and the degree of protection they received was second only to clerics. How could there be a single mage that died so cleanly? This simply didn't make sense. How did they fight? The two guild leaders threw the same question to their guild members. Therefore, the guild members explained in detail. They admitted their mistakes and gave full praise to the mages for sacrificing themselves to kill the enemy. Although they didn't kill successfully, they only killed themselves, and Qianli Drunk was eating an apple peacefully at the side. After listening to the report, the two guild leaders' faces turned pale. Who's in command? The two of them seemed to be quite calm. There was no one commanding. It was everyone's brain power, the answer was. Brain power, brain power, brain power. The two guild leaders kept repeating this phrase. Their blood rushed to their head and their faces turned from pale to rusty red. Brain power, this made the two unable to even pick a target to criticize. They couldn't possibly scold 200 people at the same time, right? The law didn't blame the masses. The two looked at each other and could see that the other was holding back a mouthful of blood. Motherfucker! Black Index Finger spoke first. A bunch of trash. Unchung Mutsu answered. That's right. Black Index Finger said. They actually ran circles around Qianli Drunk. I'm so mad. Unchung Mutsu said. In this situation, they shouldn't be standing in a square formation. They should be standing in a circular formation. This way, no matter how Qianli Drunk spins, as long as he keeps turning horizontally, we can easily keep up. Black Index Finger said. That's right. That's why I say this bunch of trash. Unchung Mutsu cursed. I'm going to die of anger too. The Black Index Finger said. It's too late to send a message now. The long-range attackers are all dead. Unchung Mutsu said. Next up, Qianli's Drunk will play with them from a distance. Black Index Finger said. Why don't we ask them to disperse? Said Unchung Mutsu. Oh. According to the situation of the previous teams being killed, Qianli Drunk's priority target is always the target of his wanted quest. From this, it can be seen that he is still prioritizing clearing his PK points. So, if we let them all disperse now, Qianli Drunk's priority will definitely be the target of his quest. This way, we can reduce our losses by quite a bit, Unchung Mutsu analyzed. I think that if the melee classes don't move, and the priests heal them, we should be able to drag this out. Qianli Drunk's damage is only high in melee. As for long-range attackers, they're still lacking compared to his melee attacks. Black Index Finger said. What if he forces us into melee combat? Matsu said. I think he's still worried about 200 people. Otherwise, he would have rushed up into melee combat a long time ago. Archers and mechanics won't be able to stop him in melee combat. Black Index Finger analyzed. You're right. Matsu thought about it and agreed with Black Index Finger. Let's just let them fight like this. It should be enough to last until we arrive. Black Index Finger said. After Matsu nodded, the two guild masters gave their orders and remotely made the battle guidelines. The answer they received made them want to vomit blood. The players at the front line told them that Qianli Drunk wasn't afraid of melee combat at all. He was currently chasing after them. Surround him. Can't we surround him with so many people? The two guild masters questioned. We can't surround him. We really can't surround him. The players who answered the two were in pain, but they were very sure. What's going on? Matsu was at a loss. Why can't we surround him? Black Index Finger was also in disbelief. His movements are too fast. We can't catch him. There's also electric wall to create obstacles, blink to suddenly change positions, double flame flash to kill people, and a skill to push people. Oh right, he just jumped on top of people's heads. How can we surround him? The players at the front line described Gu Fei's methods in detail. How many died? The two guild masters asked expressionlessly. I don't know. They didn't know, which meant that they were too busy to count. The two guild masters panicked. Would this team of more than 200 people be completely annihilated? It wouldn't be completely annihilated. Gu Fei did use many skills to ensure that he wouldn't be surrounded when fighting in the crowd. However, in this situation he couldn't calculate how much mana he used. He often ran out of mana and had no choice but to leave the battlefield. Then he would replenish his energy with fruits and chase after them, repeating the process. In this way, it would be a good result if he could kill 20 to 30 people every time he charged. The opposing players couldn't surround him, they couldn't beat him, and they couldn't chase after him either. At this time, they had already turned around and ran in the direction of the main city. The thieves and archers with speed had already run away. At this time, no one blamed them. In this situation, anyone who could run would run away. Gradually, they saw reinforcements coming from all directions. The players were overjoyed. This hellish situation had finally come to an end. Those who had not died until now were glad that they had been lucky enough to survive. Of course, Gu Fei also saw the players coming from all directions. He had already expected this. At this time, he didn't hesitate at all. After killing one more time, he left with big strides. A bunch of short-legged players looked at their own side that had been destroyed by Gu Fei. They watched as Gu Fei left like a shooting star. They couldn't do anything. They only knew the sorrow in their hearts. Where's Qianli's drunk? Where's Qianli's drunk? Matsu and Black Index Finger, who had rushed all the way from the main street of the city, finally met up with this group of players. With a glance, they had a rough idea of how many people they had lost. More than 100 people was definitely not a problem. The two quick-witted guild leaders also calculated the losses on this side from another angle. They asked the players at the wanted quest office what was the PK value of Qianli's drunk at this time. The answer was 387. The two of them were silent and did a subtraction. They already knew that in this group, Gu Fei had killed more than 100 people. It should be more like 200. 387 PK value. If he dies, he'll be close to level 0. Matsu seemed to be talking to himself. The problem is, how can we kill him? Black Index Finger said. When the two of them rushed over, Gu Fei had already fled far away. They didn't even see his shadow. The wanted quest can show his coordinates every 5 minutes, but this is useless. If he wants, he can fly to Moonlit Night City at any time. We can't chase him there. Matsu said. Even if we chase him, he suddenly flies back. What do we do? Black Index Finger said. But with so many PK value, we have to wash it, right? Matsu said. That's right. He's washing it. He's using our people to wash it. Black Index Finger's expression was pained. At this time, all the players had gathered here, but Qianli's drunk was nowhere to be seen. The players who received the wanted quest could see the coordinates change every 5 minutes. But should they chase him or not? Everyone was at a loss. If they were in the main city, Gu Fei could escape by climbing over walls and buildings. Not to mention, the wilderness was huge. They couldn't surround or block it. They had speed and teleport scrolls. Unchung Matsu was startled. It was a bit rushed before. Maybe we should make good use of this. You're saying to use players with PK value as bait. Unchung Matsu nodded. We need a convenient place to ambush and wait for him to come. What if he doesn't come? Other than this, do we have any other way? You know his coordinates, but can you chase him? I think we can gather a team of archers. Even if we can't kill him, we can keep harassing him. We don't have to worry about him counterattacking. As long as we keep a good distance, he won't be able to catch up. If we keep harassing him, there will be times when he isn't paying attention. Black Index Finger also had an idea. Then he can leave Cloud City. Unchung Matsu said. Damn. Black Index Finger forgot about his hand again. Looks like we can only follow your idea. Let's think of a place. Unchung Matsu thought. It's finally over. The team leader of Drifting's group let out a sigh of relief. The two guilds had a total of 2,100 players. Drifting sent all of their names to Gu Fei. At the same time, he asked Left Hand Right Love and Right Hand Right Handsome to copy them down. I wonder how this guy is doing. Drifting thought and went to another place in the information room. The information room had all kinds of information about the main city, including the PK value ranking of the players in the main city. Of course, this was only the information. For quests, they still had to go to the wanted mission office. 387. Drifting saw the first place and coughed up blood. He sent a message to Gu Fei. Where's your wanted mission? Washing PK? Yeah. It's now 387 points? Drifting asked. How do you know? I can find out everything. Oh, those wanted targets? It's impossible for them to be there alone. They're all in groups. I can't do anything about it. Gu Fei explained. 387 points? What are you going to do? I can't get the people from Black Alliance and Muyun. The more I get, the more PK value I get. Find someone else for me, Gu Fei said. What do you mean by someone else? Drifting's face turned green. Someone else means all the players in Cloud City except for these two guilds, Gu Fei said seriously. I have 19 PK value. You can get me. Drifting was about to reply, but when he saw the PK value list in front of him, he was surprised. Then, he laughed and quickly agreed. If you don't need to be a guild, then this PK value information will do, right? Drifting smiled at Left Hand Right Love and Right Hand Right Handsome. The two were silent for a long time. Left Hand Right Love was confused. Are our wanderers really born to serve the guard? Chapter 805. The PK information in the information room was different from that in the bounty office. There weren't any quests here, so of course, there wouldn't be a quest number displayed. Instead, it was a list of the player's name, followed by the player's PK value. It was almost as if it was specially made for Gu Fei's bounty license. This made Right Love's left hand very jealous. They didn't even realize what use they had for this little bit of value in their camp. Instead, it was all for Thousandly Drunk. I'll let it go this time. If he comes looking for trouble in the future, I'll have to charge him. This kid is rich. More importantly, he's rich, but he doesn't care about money. If there are quests in this area in the future, I think he won't refuse no matter how much we charge him. Drifting was very calm. He had already thought of the value of their faction. Information in itself was a very valuable thing. As long as he could find the person who needed it, it would be enough. Chinli Drunk was just one of them. Perhaps there were more players who needed information that could be easily found in the resource room. Drifting described his future money while sending the names of the players to Gu Fei. He was also used to sending 20 at a time. Not long after Gu Fei received it, he immediately replied, "That's amazing. 5 quests in a row. This group of names is amazing." Drifting was very calm. I'm guessing all 20 will have quests. Do you want to bet? Gu Fei immediately saw through him. How did you get them? Nothing much. The resource room also has PK information. You guys with PK value will all be listed there, Drifting said. Why didn't you use it just now? Gu Fei asked. There are only players' names on the leaderboard. It doesn't list the players' guilds, Drifting said. Oh, then you have to check the names on the leaderboard with Muyun and Black Alliance. Don't let me get people from these two guilds again, Gu Fei said. He was going to get people from these two guilds, and now he was going to get rid of them. Drifting had the urge to charge this guy, but he resisted the urge. After talking to the two guys, they were both stunned. This is too troublesome, right? No, don't check the list we copied. When I read a name, go to the data and check the player's background. It'll be faster, Drifting said. Oh, that's better. The two let out a long breath. The three of them started working again. They checked the 20 names that had been sent out. As expected, there were players from these two guilds in the list. They added information to Gu Fei. Gu Fei nodded and praised Drifting for his meticulous work. Drifting ignored him. He was thinking that when this was over, next time this guy needed to find something, he would give him some money to make up for the mental and physical loss. After Gu Fei accepted his new quest, he temporarily ignored the two unfinished quests he had received from the two guilds. He immediately rushed towards his new target. Like before, he chose a target outside the city instead of inside the city. This time, it was just a normal player. They didn't have any grudges against each other. Sometimes, it was just a team. Gu Fei almost shouted the wrong line. Leave the guild and don't kill. He had already shouted 2 words, but he realized that it was wrong. He immediately changed his words and shouted, wanted quest. If you have nothing to do, go. If you had nothing to do, go. After the city war, Qianli became famous for killing 1,000 people. Once he was drunk, he would just admit that he was unlucky. What was the point of fighting? The players in Cloud City had already accepted their fate. Drifting continued to send in new IDs. These were all accurate, so he didn't have to try them one by one. Gu Fei killed as he led the quests. He didn't meet any resistance. As expected, none of them were from the two guilds. He was happy. The quest list was densely packed with completed quests. If this continued, it wouldn't be too difficult to clear nearly 400 PK points. At this moment, Unchungmutsu and the others realized that they had been made a fool of again. He and Black Index Finger carefully chose a perfect ambush spot. Then, they randomly chose a few players with PK points to stay in the center of the encirclement. The others scattered and waited for orders. Then, the wanted quest tracked the coordinates of Qianli's drunk. However, they couldn't see where he was heading. Not long after, other bad news came. In the Conspirator Guild, someone was finally given a wanted quest by Qianli's drunk. The only difference was that he only completed the quest and didn't kill anyone else. This was the first time that Qianli's drunk attacked players from guilds other than Muyun and Black Alliance. The saying that the bird that sticks out will be shot doesn't seem to be true anymore. However, he only completed the quest and didn't kill anyone else. This difference seemed to be very subtle. According to the players who were given a wanted quest, Qianli only shouted about wanted quest. He didn't threaten them to leave the guild or anything like that. The hearts of these guild players were in turmoil. Some people thought that Qianli's drunk was letting them go, so they treated them differently. As one guild after another was placed on the wanted list, everyone felt that Thousand Miles Drunk already knew which guilds were involved. If they continued to resist stubbornly with his leniency, it was likely that Thousand Miles Drunk wouldn't give them any face. Soon, 3 guilds withdrew from the competition without even saying a word. Although the 3 guild leaders couldn't contact Qianli, they thought about the very overpowered players in the prison. So, they paid a fee to visit the prison and found Sword Demon. They apologized to him and said that they had completely withdrawn. There was an uproar in the prison. Sword Demon wasn't alone now. His prison was full of players from Black Alliance and Muyun. With so many people, someone finally recognized the silent guy sitting in the corner. It was the guild leader of their rival guild. Taunts, and all sorts of other things could be heard. Everyone vented their anger and fear of 8,000 miles drunk on the sword specter. Fortunately, the prison was like a safe zone, and no one could fight. Otherwise, it was hard to say what would have happened. But what kind of person was Sword Demon? He was the most famous top expert in the past. Praise, worship, jealousy, ridicule, and sarcasm. What hadn't he experienced? He couldn't even be bothered to talk back to these guys. He calmly ignored them. It wasn't until a visitor came to the prison and asked about the location of the overpowered players that Sword Demon reacted. He stood up from the corner and walked out. He completely ignored the players around him. Sword Demon had no idea what was happening outside. These 3 guild leaders came to apologize and expressed their intention to withdraw. He was confused. Before he could say anything, his cellmates, the cellmates opposite him, and the cellmates next to him all started scolding him. These players were all from the 2 big guilds. The 3 guild leaders didn't move at all. When they took this step, they had already thought through everything clearly. Muyun and Black Alliance were very strong, but this strength was probably a thing of the past. They had offended enemies that they shouldn't have offended, and they had no way out. The leaders of these 2 guilds kept telling them that if they killed Qianli, his threat as the #1 assassin would obviously disappear. Now it seemed that these 2 were right about not being a threat. However, they were the ones who were no longer a threat because it seemed like their guilds were going to be destroyed by Qianli when he got drunk. After expressing their apologies and remorse to Sword Ghost once again, and Sword Ghost accepted their apologies in a daze, the 3 guild leaders left happily. As for the noisy others, they were also treated as air. These players scolded, but when they saw the 3 guild leaders personally running to the prison to apologize to this overpowered guild leader who was still in prison, they guessed that something big must have happened outside. They were already feeling guilty. Scolding was just to cover up their guilt. Now that the 3 of them had left, everyone had complicated feelings when they faced Sword Demon again. Those who had scolded Sword Demon too fiercely before now looked uneasy. Everyone looked at each other with worry in their eyes. What about Sword Demon? He just quietly returned to his corner. This time, when he walked by, the players actually began to make way for him, intentionally or unintentionally. What on earth happened? The Sword Ghost, who had returned to the corner, was also puzzled. Gu Fei's PK cleansing activities continued smoothly, and the damage he unintentionally caused to the other alliance continued. After the 3 guilds, 2 more guilds also chose to leave. They didn't go to the prison to find Sword Demon, but they sent an extremely sincere letter to Qianli when he got drunk. Gu Fei was busy clearing PKs, so he didn't have the time to return to the city to read the letter. Moreover, he didn't dare to reply, so he didn't know that the other side's alliance was already in a state of panic due to his random clearing of PKs. Unchung Mutsu and Black Index Finger only knew that Qianli had expanded the scope of the attack. 5 guilds had already left, and they were still in the dark. The 5 guild leaders didn't send any news, and the members who participated in the battle also left silently. The 5 guilds were all small guilds, so no one paid attention to them. But with Qianli's extensive wanted missions, the 2 guild leaders finally decided to use all the people with PK value from each guild as bait. They had to lure Qianli into this elaborate trap. There was no guild information on the list provided by Drifting. Even if they added information on the guilds, Gu Fei only knew about Black Alliance and Muyun family. He continued to follow the quest list, accepting quests according to distance. Along the way, there was finally a certain guild's bait that Gu Fei set as the next target to complete. Completely unaware of the situation, Gu Fei quickly rushed towards this target. This area was already filled with informants from Black Index Finger and Unchung Mutsu. Along the way, there were many players who pretended to be ordinary players. Qianli's drunk is coming. The 2 guild leaders received reports from several people. The coordinates in the wanted mission refreshed, and it showed that Qianli's drunk was approaching them. Chapter 806. Attention all squads. Attention all squads. The target is approaching. The target is approaching. When Unchung Matsu sent this message to the team leaders, he felt that his hands were trembling. He was too nervous. Black index finger was beside him. He did not make a sound. His hands looked very steady. However, when Unchung Matsu looked down, he realized that the guy's legs were trembling. "He's not even as good as me," Unchung Matsu said in disdain. He felt that the trembling of his hands could be interpreted as nervousness. Even his legs were trembling. This must be fear, right? Victory or defeat depends on this one move. Unchung Matsu clenched his teeth. He did not know how he could kill Qianli if he missed this opportunity. This opponent was too difficult to deal with. The concept of strength in numbers was completely overturned in front of him. At this moment, all they could see was Qianli's agility and mobility. As for their numbers, it was as if they did not exist. Keep updating his position, Unchung Matsu thought as he sent a message to the spy who discovered Qianli's drunken state. He stopped, the spy suddenly said. He stopped. Yes, Unchung Matsu was anxious. He was very anxious. The spy had spread out far away. That was why he discovered Qianli's drunken state earlier. He had not entered their attack range yet. But why did he suddenly stop? He knows. Unchung Matsu was confused. Two words immediately popped up in his mind: traitor. Unchung Matsu and Black Index Finger were guarding against this. So this time, they did not go all out. Each of them chose their old subordinates and brothers that they could completely rely on. The other participating guilds also carefully selected their people according to the two's request. The ambush this time was really about quality and not quantity. The first requirement for participating players was that they must be reliable. They did not expect that even with so many precautions, the news would still be leaked. The level of the bitch the other party had bribed was quite high. It's actually a guy that we thought was trustworthy. The Unchung Matsu and Black Index Finger had discussed it in private. They were certain that if there was a mole, he was definitely bribed and not planted long ago. The reason was very simple. If there had been a traitor in the first place, how could their encirclement plan have succeeded? The only possibility was that someone in the guild had been bribed by the other party. Looking at the group of brothers behind him, all of whom he trusted 100%, Unchung Matsu could not believe that one of them had been bribed by his opponent. He felt extremely pained. However, on second thought, he realized that they might not be from his family. Perhaps they were under the Black Index Finger. Black Index Finger and the Unchung Matsu were thinking more and more in sync with each other. As soon as the spy said that Qianli was drunk and stopped walking, he immediately turned back to check his team. In the end, he couldn't believe that there was a traitor among his brothers, so he also thought that there was something wrong with the Unchung Matsu's men. As a result, the two of them stared at each other. Sigh. The two of them sighed. What do we do now? Unchung Matsu said. We can't just wait like this. Let's move the team, expand the area, and then shrink back. What do you think? Black Index Finger said. Let's wait a little longer? Since they didn't bring a lot of people this time, it wasn't possible to form a huge encirclement and then trap the other party, especially against drunk Qianli, who was a top-notch runner. He moved. He's continuing to walk. The spy finally came back with news. The two of them let out a sigh of relief. You're overthinking. Unchung Matsu revealed a smile. That's right. Maybe he just received a message or something, Black Index Finger said. Everyone continue to get ready. Focus. Unchung Matsu ordered. Everyone was on standby. The few players who were used as bait continued to scatter around the area as if there was no one else around. No matter which one of them drunk Qianli attacked, the encirclement could instantly launch an attack. The mages would bombard the area, the archers would harass and restrict him, the other classes would block the way out, and the lurkers would set up traps. Everything had been carefully planned out. Unchung Matsu went through all the details in his heart again and felt that there were no flaws. Drunk Qianli's coordinates were reported by the wanted players. As for the specific movements, there were spies along the way to monitor them. In order to prevent any flaws from being seen through, all the spies arranged this time were scouting in fixed locations. Once they left their line of sight, there would naturally be another spy following them. From the beginning to the end, they didn't need to follow him at all. They only needed to observe from afar. He's getting closer, he's getting closer. This was the last spy. From here, they could already see the trap that drunk Chinli would eventually walk into. Everyone forgot to breathe. He's coming in. Everyone pay attention. Unchung Matsu shouted. Look at his direction. His attack might be. Fuck, why did he stop again? The spy shouted. Everyone, don't panic. Unchung Matsu was very calm this time. He only stopped for a moment. Perhaps it was because he suddenly needed a long and serious reply to the messages that he had been sending earlier. Hence, he stopped again. He didn't want to create a tense atmosphere for himself. It's already the countdown. Everyone, don't let your guard down. Black Index Finger encouraged everyone. Everyone knew that this opportunity was hard to come by. There was no need for him to talk nonsense. Everyone was fully focused. Their minds were filled with the black, terrifying figure. He's looking around. The more the spy looked, the more he felt that something was wrong. After Gu Fei stopped this time, he looked left and right, but he didn't look into the trap area. He seemed to be looking for something. Looking around? He took a detour. At this moment, the spy shouted again. Fuck, there really is a traitor. Black Index Finger jumped up. Let's see where he's going first. Unchung Matsu restrained his impulse this time. I can't see him anymore. The spy replied. Left. Unchung Matsu's face turned green. He turned around and saw Chinli at the bottom of the hill. He was drunk and was looking up. When he saw the bunch of people lying on the ground, he smiled and waved at them. Traitor, traitor. Unchung Matsu only muttered these two words. Fuck, what else can we say? Brothers, let's fight. Black Index Finger was beside Unchung Matsu. He turned around and saw Gu Fei. He knew that the trap had failed this time, so he jumped up and challenged. All the players were prepared. The first wave of attack wasn't careless at all. However, this was completely different from what they had prepared. 4/5 of the players who were ambushing couldn't see Gu Fei at all, let alone attack. As for blocking the way out, that had become a legend. The current attack seemed more like self-defense. Why you still in a daze? Do you want to die? Black Index Finger saw that Unchung Matsu was still in a daze, so he gave him a slap on the head. Not to the extent of dying. Unchung Matsu smiled bitterly. They didn't have many people, but they still had around 1,000 people. He believed that as long as he commanded them well, Chinli couldn't do anything to them even when he was drunk. Killing 1,000 people was just a legend. However, Chinli couldn't do anything to them when he was drunk, and they couldn't do anything to Chinli when he was drunk. To them, this was the same as losing. Gu Fei, who was at the bottom of the hill, easily dodged the wave of attacks. The other players who were lying in ambush all rushed in this direction. Black Index Finger didn't plan to give up so easily. He commanded 6 squads to take a detour from the left and right. He still wanted to cut off Chenli's escape route. The archers and sorcerers beside him fired arrows wildly. Fighting with Chenli from afar was at least safer than fighting in close combat. Under Black Index Finger's command, Chenli tried to charge forward several times, but he was forced back by the attacks. This made him more excited as he fought. Chenli didn't give up and tried again. If he kept fighting, the 6 squads he sent out would be able to cut off his escape route. Then, they would be able to surround him. Brothers, beat him up. Beat him up. Black Index Finger shouted. Those who didn't know what was going on might think that it was a fierce battle. But in fact, it was just a bunch of people pressing down on one person at the bottom of the hill, not daring to let him get any closer. We can start charging now. Unchung Matsu observed the situation calmly and suddenly said. He saw the 6 squads that cut off Chenli's escape route. They actually completed the detour. Unchung Matsu didn't expect Black Index Finger to use such a simple tactic against Chenli. Was he too confident? Archers, attack harder. Pay attention to the rhythm. Don't stop. Black Index Finger's legs stopped shaking, but his breathing was getting heavier and heavier. It was so heavy that many people around him looked at him. It was just a command, But he was working so hard. What a talent! Black Index Finger was really nervous now. At such a critical moment, if the archer's continuous attack was not enough, and Gu Fei had the time to use the teleportation scroll, all their efforts would be in vain. Fortunately, everyone was mentally prepared for this situation. The archers had also studied and coordinated very carefully. At this time, they all worked hard. No one made mistakes because of nervousness. They fought steadily and surely. Under their continuous attacks, Gu Fei really didn't have the time to even chant, let alone use the teleportation scroll. Being chased by the arrows of the archers, Gu Fei suddenly began to retreat. He came from the left side, and now he returned to the same path. After a few steps, he had already hidden behind the hill. Unchung Mutsu and Black Index Finger shouted to attract people to chase after him. A bunch of people saw that Qianli was helplessly chased away by them. They all became spirited and prepared to rush down the hill amidst the battle cries. The one who was walking at the outermost glanced out of the corner of his eyes. He vaguely saw the drunk figure of Qianli. The direction of the figure's movement startled him, and he said in surprise, "He seems to have turned in." Turned in? Fuck. Unchung Mutsu was startled when he heard that. Then he was immediately shocked. The others also realized what was going on and quickly began to move horizontally. At this time, he actually rushed into the ambush that we had originally planned. But our ambush has already been broken. This guy. Unchung Mutsu pulled a handful of his hair. He realized that they had obviously been fooled again. Drunk Qianli had performed a diversion. His target was still the players with PK points. Obviously, he also knew that these players were bait and poison. Even so, he still didn't give up. He first went to mess up the fishing net and hook, and then he greedily rushed towards the bait again. Are those guys still there? The battle had been going on for a while. The players who were used as bait had been forgotten by Unchung Mutsu. He quickly went to receive the message. The message could not be received. A cold system prompt appeared. Unchung Mutsu's hair was pulled out again. These idiots, were they going to wait there all along? The bait did not want to wait in the same place, but when Qianli turned around before getting drunk, they immediately lost their value and were immediately forgotten. Even the original spies had returned to their respective teams to participate in the battle, but none of them called out to them. Their opponent was Qianli, and every team was going for 100 players. They were the bait, but there were only about 10 of them. They definitely did not have any clerics. Were they supposed to send themselves to Qianli to complete the mission? The bait were the same as everyone else. They did not expect that Qianli, when drunk, was tearing down their nets, and that he still wanted to come back to eat. They thought that staying in the same place was the safest. They did not expect that Qianli, when drunk, would turn around and block them. Gu Fei was also quite surprised that these guys were so obedient and still stayed in the same place to wait for him. He expected that these guys might run out, and then he would run around to kill them. But now, they lined up neatly in front of him. How could Gu Fei be polite? He went up and slashed 3 of them with 1 slash. The faster archers on the hillside had also caught up. They looked down from above and shot wildly at Gu Fei. Gu Fei immediately began to change his footwork. The archers could see that Gu Fei was right under their eyelids, but they could not aim at him. Those who had their eyes on this position released their bowstrings, and they were already in another position. Unchung Mutsu, who had short legs, arrived a step later. When he saw this scene, he immediately knew that the archers had been suppressing him previously. This guy's footwork was too flashy, and flashy footwork was the nemesis of archers. It was much harder to predict and shoot than to shoot from a fixed position. Block it, block the entrance, don't let him run out. The place that Unchung Mutsu and the others carefully chose was a natural pocket formation on the hillside. There was a small leveling area in the hole, and it was a popular place for players to level up. There were many such places in this mountainous area. Once a team occupied it, there would basically be no disturbance from outsiders. The monster's spawning speed was also just right. It was the most popular leveling area in Cloud City, and it was extremely popular and highly sought after. There were people occupying it 24/7. However, this terrain was too conspicuous. If Qianli was drunk and walked in front of it, there was a high chance that he would be immediately suspicious. To deal with this kind of situation, Unchung Matsu and the others had a way to deal with it. It was just that before they could use it, Gu Fei took a detour to find them first, and all their arrangements were beautifully ruined. At this time, Gu Fei was still in the pocket, but Unchung Matsu did not feel optimistic at all. The people who were originally arranged to block the entrance had now run elsewhere due to the readjustment of the battle strategy. There was not enough people to block the entrance in a hurry. Unchung Matsu shouted, but he did not move. Hence, his subordinates and some players from other guilds did not move in silence. Everyone could see that it was a problem to block the entrance with manpower. In the face of Qianli's drunkenness, wasn't it a free gift? Their guild leader only knew how to shout, but he did not take the lead himself. Wasn't it because he wanted the others to be cannon fodder to buy time? At this crucial moment, the command was not effective. Unchung Matsu was secretly angry that the others did not have the spirit to sacrifice themselves. However, it was not good to say this, so Unchung Matsu could only brace himself and set an example. Although his warrior's legs were short, there was a slight acceleration when he slid down the hillside, so he was still agile. As he slid down, he shouted, "Everyone, come down and block the entrance." When Unchung Matsu's subordinates saw that their guild leader had already taken the lead, it was not good for them to continue playing dumb. They also braced themselves and started to slide down. The archers were happy. They could continue to shoot arrows from high up. It did not matter if they hit the target or not, they did not need to run down anyway. Meanwhile, the players from other guilds looked at each other. Should they listen to Unchung Matsu's orders and be cannon fodder? This was a problem. Damn it. Come down quickly. Unchung Matsu was the first to land. He looked up and saw that other than his brothers, the other guilds were hesitating and not taking action. Unchung Matsu was furious. If they did not unite at this time, wouldn't they die? Looking back, he realized that the 6 outflanking squads could not be counted on anymore. The archers that were left beside the black index finger were all there, and the sorcerers were about to get into position. However, once the sorcerers were in position, their attacks would cover the entire area. By then, Qianli would definitely try to break through the encirclement. He seemed to be standing too far in front. Everything happened earlier than Unchung Matsu had expected. After Gu Fei killed a few people while dodging the arrows, he began to retreat in advance. There were less than 100 people from Unchung Matsu's side, and there were only 4 to 5 rows of people blocking the entrance. To prevent Qianli from teleporting through the human wall, they had to be separated into the inside and the outside. They had to be as weak as they could be. Looking at the way Qianli charged over, it was as if they did not exist at all. There's no way to run. Unchung Matsu did not expect this to be the result of him leading the way. If he were to retreat now, he would really lose his face. He could only bite the bullet and hope that Qianli would not charge through him. Unchung Matsu was praying when he felt like he had fallen into an ice cellar. This was because he heard Gu Fei greeting him, "Greetings, Guild Leader Yunmu." "So it's me?" Unchung Matsu knew that he would be Qianli's #1 target once he came down. He had really become a cannon fodder now. Dying in the line of duty, he hoped that he could earn some prestige in the guild. Unchung Matsu was considered an expert, but he did not have much hope for his own survival. Although he knew that there were many priests behind him waiting to heal him, could they keep up with Qianli's skills? He turned around dual flame flash, thunder palm, lightning spell. A few instant cast spells were cast in one go, and they were so connected that the grandmasters of combat who were famous for their combos were so embarrassed that they wanted to crawl into a hole. Killing people in one shot is so fucking smooth. Unchung Matsu said helplessly. Cannon fodder. Chapter 807. I won't kill you if you quit the guild. Gu Fei shouted. He stepped on a player and flipped over the human wall. His shout was so loud that all the players on the hill heard it. The players who weren't from Black Alliance and Muyun all looked at the players from these 2 guilds. As long as one was an opponent of these 2 guilds, they would shout, "I won't kill you if you quit." If it wasn't, they wouldn't say such a thing. It looked like 1,000 miles drunk was really going to shoot the bird that poked its head out to the end. What about us? Are we going to continue fighting like this? Many of the players were distracted by these thoughts, and they lost their aim. Mages, archers, and the like chased after 1,000 miles drunk, and their attacks almost hit the players who were intercepting them. I won't kill you if you quit the guild. Faced with the obstruction of the second row, Gu Fei shouted out a battle cry, then used dual flame flash to open up a path, and ran away without looking back. The players who were instantly killed cried. He wouldn't kill them if he quit the guild, but he had to give them a chance to quit. He shouted as he killed them. Those who were killed became cannon fodder and gave the chance to others. Qianli left drunk. Black Index Finger's face turned black as he glared at everyone present. If they had succeeded in dealing with Qianli, they wouldn't have hated the traitor so much. However, they failed again this time, and it was obvious that the information had been leaked. Black Index Finger really wanted to know who the traitor was and eat him alive. Who was the traitor? Actually, this plan of theirs was a traitor. Gu Fei had a huge list of wanted missions, and his coordinates would be refreshed every minute. When he picked a new target, he immediately realized that there were many similar or even identical targets. These people were together, there was no doubt about it. In this area, there were many people from the Black Alliance and Mu Yun. Were they gathering players with PK value to protect them? It didn't seem like it. They had a large number of people in the city's revival points and prisons. If they wanted to protect them, they could just throw these people into the crowd and protect them. However, at this moment, they were clearly gathered in an area outside the city. Their objective was simply too obvious. Gu Fei was fully aware that this was a trap, but the more it was a trap, the more he wanted to go. Killing in itself was not the goal. The goal was to instill fear in the other party and make them lose their confidence. What could be more devastating than stepping on an opponent's trap? So, Gu Fei went, and his trip was very successful. The bait that the other party had prepared was all eaten by him. Before he left, he killed the other party's leader and easily left. This was what it was like to be bold and skillful. The president of the Unchung Mutsu, who had been killed as cannon fodder, sent a message after his death. When he learned that Qianli had left in a drunken stupor, he was naturally depressed and did not even have the mood to talk. He squatted in the warrior camp and sulked. The Unchung Mutsu had no idea how to continue the current situation. As a guild, they had already tried their best, but the situation was still the same. Perhaps they could only wait for the studio to make a breakthrough. They said that the teleportation scroll that was sold to Qianli had been tampered with, but when would it be effective? As one of the leaders of the guild's operation, Unchung Mutsu knew about the collusion between Ying Qi's studio and them. At this moment, he immediately sent a message to Ying Qi's contact person, but he did not receive a reply after a long time. Unchung Mutsu suddenly had a bad premonition. Ying Qi's studio was indeed powerful. The new mode of the parallel world where all the players gathered in the same world gave them an unprecedented opportunity. In the past, when they were operating, they needed to be distributed to various servers. It was basically impossible for them to directly help each other. However, in the parallel world, the studio had truly become a whole. The working groups set up in each city carried out their work orderly under the unified command of the higher-ups. They coordinated and assisted each other, and the profits were many times greater than before. Ying Qi saw the glorious future of the studio in this brand new game, so they spared no effort in increasing their investment and actively expanded their business. Everything was going smoothly. Ying Qi's business grew bigger and bigger, and the profits were getting higher and higher. Wherever there was a way to make money, Ying Qi would be involved. Of course, there were some unsatisfactory parts in the process. However, the biggest failure occurred when they were striving for efficiency in leveling up. Qianli got drunk, rejected Ying Qi's request to cooperate, and even killed 5 knights who was in charge of the negotiation. Although there were some traps in the process, business negotiations had always been about deception and deception. 5 knights never thought that there was anything wrong with what he did. Unfortunately, Qianli got drunk and looked down on his methods, so he killed him. The higher-ups of the studio only cared about the results and not the process. They didn't get the big deal, but they still wanted him to bear the responsibility. 5 Knights, who was in a bad situation, gritted his teeth when he saw Qianli get drunk. He already had the intention to take revenge. Later on, during the city war, Cloud City unexpectedly had an unimaginable ending. 5 Knights was keenly aware that this abnormal ending would lead to a monopoly of the city districts. As a businessman, he was the clearest about how wonderful a monopoly was. It was a pity that he had to face Thousand Miles drunk again. Negotiating with this person, whether it was confidence or patience, 5 Knights was gone. As a result, he secretly contacted the guilds of Cloud City, who were still dissatisfied after the war. As a result, he hit it off with a group of people. On the surface, it seemed like the guilds were the ones fighting and killing each other. However, in a period where the system was not active, the only way to form an alliance with so many guilds was through the ubiquitous studio. 5 Knights had already confirmed the game's setting from their studio's source in the game. If a guild with a city district disbanded, then the city district would not be taken back by the system. Instead, it would be auctioned off publicly, and only guilds could participate in the auction. Which guild could compete with a studio in an auction? 5 Knights was very confident. As long as they could cripple against Overpowered and Reborn Amethyst, Ingqi would definitely be able to take all 6 districts for themselves. As for the guilds that cooperated with them, they would have to promise them some benefits. However, this was not the main point. From the planning to the implementation, everything went smoothly. Moreover, against Overpowered and Reborn Amethyst actually merged, which made things easier for them. Originally, they needed to exert their strength against 2 guilds, but now, the problem was solved in one go. Surrounded, then threatened to leave. The operation went smoothly. Against Overpowered's will, the majority of the guild members left in fear. However, after that, Qianli got drunk again. That bastard actually jumped out and killed everyone in their guild. At first, no one understood. They thought that he would rather die in the hands of his own people than die in such a despicable trap. Reality proved that Qianli wasn't that bored. The people he killed were all sent to prison, and he himself teleported away. After running around with Qianli, no one thought much of it at first. But now, no one would think that way anymore. The guilds in Cloud City were almost driven mad by Qianli's drunk. On the other hand, the studio had yet to experience the power of Qianli's drunk killer. However, they could already feel his connections and influence. Ingqi plotted in Cloud City, but in the end, the first place to be retaliated was in Moonlit City. Ingqi's studio could be said to be in deep trouble in Moonlit City. 5 Knights was the manager of the 6 cities. Among the 6 cities under him, Moonlit City was the most developed. Because of the chaos in Moonlit City, there were many loopholes for their studio to exploit. In fact, Dust did not lack the support of Ingqi's studio. Otherwise, Silver Moon would not have had so much influence after picking up a piece of equipment when the boss was in trouble. They could rely on their strength to completely suppress the entire city when the other guilds were still developing. Thinking about this, 5 Knights got angry again. Because it was Qianli's drunk killer who destroyed Dust's guild. In fact, 5 Knights really liked the chaos in Moonlit City. It was always easy to earn money from war. It was the same even in the game. Fighting and killing every day, how much equipment would be dropped? If equipment was dropped, they would have to buy it again. If they bought it, it would be dropped again. Everyone would fight for it, and the studio would raise the prices. What a happy and harmonious scene. In the end, it was destroyed by Qianli's drunk killer. The guilds of the previous world disintegrated, and new guilds rose to power. Those people who seemed impulsive and often cursed at the slightest provocation were actually very careful in managing their guilds. They continued to grow, and even established the 10 Guilds Alliance. In the past, they used the previous world as a warning. Although they were arrogant, they also restrained themselves. Compared to the time when the previous world was dominant, Moonlit Night City was much more peaceful. 5 Knights missed the chaos. He wanted to support a new guild. Even the manager of the city, Ingqi, personally went into action. However, surpassing the 10 guilds alliance seemed more and more impossible. Bribing the core members of the other party, sowing discord, 5 knights used all kinds of methods. But such a group of roguelike people, their cohesiveness was extremely shocking. 5 knights finally understood. The 10 guilds alliance wasn't the 10 guilds, but the 11 guilds. There was another 11th guild, and they didn't need the system settings to gather together. They were friends, brothers, and they were scattered across the 10 guilds. As long as these people didn't fall, the 10 guilds alliance would always be the 10 guilds alliance. 5 knights also thought of using this group of people. In the end, the people he sent out were killed amidst the shouts of "Damn you." 5 knights was afraid. The 2 big guilds that he supported also carefully hid the background of their studio. The core members of the 10 Guilds Alliance led by Yun Zhongmu were a group of people who thought with knives, in 5 knights' words. He needed to make other plans. The matter of Moonlit City was temporarily put aside. 5 knights was doing his best to fight for Cloud City. If he could get this city, Cloud City would become the main city that he would focus on developing in the future. In the end, he met Qianli. In the end, Yun Zhongmu and the others who thought with knives also came. In the end, Moonlit City started a harvest operation against their In-Chi studio. 5 knights had put in a lot of effort in the 10 Guilds Alliance. When hiring people, he deliberately gave priority to the people of the 10 Guilds Alliance. He wanted to get in touch with the 10 Guilds Alliance and continue to infiltrate their forces. One day, when the time was right, he could control or disintegrate the 10 Guilds Alliance without any bloodshed. This was 5 knights' new idea to deal with the 10 Guilds Alliance. Obviously, it needed time, so he was still carefully operating. In the end, because of the matter of Cloud City, Moonlit City made a big storm against their studio. 5 knights knew that he was still far from controlling the 10 Guilds Alliance. However, he thought that the seeds he sowed would have some effect. With so many people speaking up for the studio, would Yun Zhongmu still dare to insist on fighting against In-Chi Studio? Yun Zhongmu dared. News came from those who were kicked out of the guild because of In-Chi Studio. In response to these different voices, Yun Zhongmu only said 2 words, "Scram." As expected of a creature that thinks with knives. 5 knights said after hearing this. Moonlit City had already started to attack In-Chi Studio. He quickly ordered all the shops to be closed. However, soon after, the guild that he supported also suffered a crazy attack from the 10 Guilds Alliance. "If you quit, you won't be killed." Moonlit City was filled with the same voice. As for whether this slogan was specially unified with Gu Fei, no one knew. Proud Emperor and Weeds, these 2 people's guilds were originally second only to the 10 Guilds Alliance in Moonlit City. 5 knights also hid the background of their studio. For example, the previous poaching activities were carried out by these 2 guilds, pretending that it was a situation of a guild battle in the game. However, because of Qianli's drunkenness, these 2 guilds' background was exposed, and the 10 Guilds Alliance had a complete conflict with these 2 guilds. They killed people on sight. In reality, there weren't many members in these 2 guilds who were truly studios. These 2 guilds had always been at odds with the 10 Guilds Alliance, so the normal players of these 2 guilds didn't have a good impression of the 10 Guilds Alliance. Now that Yun Zhongmu walked the path of moderation, he didn't go crazy against such an opponent. This caused the players of these 2 guilds to think that the 10 Guilds Alliance was just SOSO. However, this time, Yun Zhongmu completely exploded. They brought out the ruthlessness that they had when they fought against the Dust Guild in the past. They searched all over the world for the players of these 2 guilds to kill. This massacre came too suddenly, and the players of these 2 guilds were extremely passive. Before they could understand what was going on, the revival point had already been completely occupied by the 10 Guilds Alliance. They shouted that they would quit and wouldn't be killed. It was obvious that they wanted to completely eradicate these 2 guilds. How many people do the 2 guilds have left? Yun Zhongmu was like a great general as he led a group of people to inspect the revival point. He also contacted the informants he had planted in these 2 guilds to find out the current results of their pursuit. Proud Heaven still has 612 people. The informant of Proud Heaven who was hiding in Proud Emperor reported. Although he couldn't come into contact with the core members of the guild, he could do such a small thing as counting the number of people in a guild. Miscellaneous Bunch has 647 people. The informant of Miscellaneous Bunch who was hiding in the weeds reported. Too slow. Kill them even more fiercely. After Yun Jong-mu reported these two figures to the whole guild, he gave the order to hurry up. Proud Heaven and Miscellaneous Bunch were both rank 5 guilds with a maximum of 750 people. After suffering a thunderous attack from the 10 Guilds Alliance, and after seeing the determination of the 10 Guilds Alliance, over 100 of their members had already left their guilds. However, Yun Jong-mu wasn't satisfied with this efficiency. He really wanted to pile all the people from these two guilds onto Black Dragon Mountain Road and then throw rocks down. It would be very satisfying to kill as many people as possible. What's the rush? We have to give them some time to hesitate. Han Family Young Master was with Yun Jong-mu at this moment. He looked down on Yun Jong-mu's impatient and ungentlemanly manner. Keep a close eye on all the shops. I want to see if he has the guts to ever open a shop. Yun Jong-mu continued to shout as if he didn't hear Han Family Young Master's words. Because he had to command 10 guilds at once, Yun Jong-mu didn't need to send messages. He brought 10 guild members with him to act as his messengers. Thus, unlike other guild leaders, Yun Jong-mu actually shouted using words. His shouts could be heard by everyone on the street. It was very imposing. The 10 messengers had been doing this for a long time. Sometimes, when they chatted in the guild channel, there would be people asking, "Are these the words of the guild leader?" It was the 10 Guilds Alliance. Some of the players in the guild referred to Yun Jong-mu as the guild leader. TSK TSK TSK. Han Family Young Master shook his head. Yun Jong-mu's commands didn't conform to his aesthetics. It wasn't without reason that the two sides hated each other. Lan Yi was even more annoyed than Han Family Young Master. Qianli had come all the way here to help Qianli. But now, it seemed like he was listening to Yun Jong-mu's orders. How could he tolerate this? Yun Jong-mu obviously knew that if he went to command Lan Yi, he would definitely be ridiculed. He simply ignored Lan Yi and the others and commanded his own 10 Guild Alliance to fight. Lan Yi and the others had nothing to do. They were extremely lonely. You're randomly killing people. Is this considered attacking the workshop? Fuck, does the workshop rely on the players' levels to survive? Besides, how many workshop members can there be in this guild? I think you're just taking this opportunity to eliminate the guild that's resisting you, right? Lan Yi had nothing to do, so he could only argue with Yun Jong-mu. Yun Jong-mu said, "The 10 messengers sent a message, fuck off." The 10 Guild Alliance players were all at a loss. What did this senseless fuck off mean? The messengers reacted instinctively. As soon as they heard Yun Jong-mu speak, they immediately sent the message. They were afraid that they would miss the opportunity. After sending the message, they realized that something was wrong. Amidst the discussion, they pretended to be silent and didn't explain. He's probably trying to chase Ing-chi out of Moonlit Night City? Someone really understood. You guys continue to curse. I'm going over there. Han Family Young Master said this and walked away. Everyone looked over. The place he was talking about was a tavern. That Lan Yi is right. This kind of method is far from enough to attack the workshop. Han Family Young Master seemed to be talking to himself. He pushed open the door of the tavern and walked in. After looking around, he saw a person walking over with a smile. If you want scrolls, you can just send a message. Why did you come personally? After the person welcomed Han Family Young Master to his seat, he handed him a glass of wine and said politely, "Hee, it's not just scrolls this time." Han Family Young Master laughed. The only thing that could truly destroy the workshop was the workshop. Han Family Young Master thought in his heart, "You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."